Hello everyone, today we will learn about another case. The case of Caroline Crouch. This case brings us to Glyka Nera, a coastal town near central Athens in Greece. Caroline Crouch's parents moved to Greece from England when she was 8 years old, and they lived there for all the following years. At the age of 15, Caroline met her future husband, Bobish, in the town of Alonissos, where her parents had settled. Bobish's parents had a summer house for recreation, which he often visited. Although he was 14 years older, Caroline and Bobish eventually started dating and then living together. In 2019, they got married. Bobish was successful and respected. He held the position of helicopter pilot, and Caroline was studying at the university, hoping to enter the School of Public Catering. Caroline, 20, lived there with her 34-year-old husband, Bobish Anagnostopoulos, and her black belt in boxing. She loved animals and got herself a husky puppy when he was only 2 months old. Caroline named the dog Roxy and devoted a lot of time to the pet. In addition to the puppy, there were 4 more cats. A few weeks after their wedding, Caroline found out she was pregnant. Unfortunately, after only 3 months, her pregnancy was interrupted. However, there were no complications. After that, she was able to conceive again and gave birth to a beautiful girl, whom her parents named Lydia. Caroline's world revolved around Lydia. Everyone who knew her said that motherhood was absolutely everything to her. On May 11, 2021, the police received a call from a house in Glyka Nera, which turned out to be the home of Caroline and Bobish. The officers were told a story so horrifying that even the oldest and most experienced detectives were in complete shock. When the police arrived at the house in question, they were confronted with a horrific scene. Caroline was severely injured, and little Lydia was screaming and trying to wake her mother up. Tragically, Caroline was lying on the bed and was already dead. Her husband, Bobish, was tied up and handcuffed, with his eyes taped shut. Bobish told the police that a gang of robbers had broken into the house early in the morning while everyone was asleep. One of the gang members put a gun to little Lydia's head and demanded to know where the hidden money was. Bobish indicated where the money was and begged them not to hurt the child. Caroline, who practiced boxing, tried to resist, but several people immediately immobilized her. The leader of the gang personally strangled her, taking all the cash and jewelry. The bandits left, having tied up Bobish and taped his mouth and eyes. As a result, he lost consciousness. When Bobish came to his senses, he managed to find a phone through a small gap in the tape over his eyes using his nose. He dialed the last number in the call log, which was a neighbor's number. When the neighbor picked up, heard muffled sounds and moaning, realizing the situation, the neighbor rushed to Bobish's house, helped him call the police, and recalled later that he had heard some sounds from the neighboring house but did not attach any importance to them. When the police began to inspect the house, they established that more than £10,000 in cash had been stolen, as well as jewelry worth £20,000. Bobish said the family had recently bought a plot of land and had to pay some workers. He also suggested that someone had warned the gang, or that someone within the gang must have known about the family's financial situation in advance. The brutal nature of the crime sent shockwaves throughout Greece and soon spread around the world. The police were equally horrified and commented on how rare such crimes were in their country. The public was outraged and panicked, extending a helping hand to offer support to Bobish and his family. Although there were cameras and video surveillance around the family's house, there was little usable footage, as the cameras were not working or had not been turned on during the robbery and subsequent murder. Footage from an outdoor camera captured a car driving by around the time of the robbery, but the high fence obstructed the view of the make or license plate. Unfortunately, DNA collected from beneath Caroline's fingernails was inconclusive, and there were no witnesses. The only accounts came from the neighbor and Bobish himself. This story spread through the media like wildfire, and soon the world was waiting to see who would be arrested for this terrible crime. Government officials announced a €300,000 reward 3 days after Caroline's death for information about the massacre. All shops, bars, and restaurants on the island of Alonissos closed in solidarity, as 2,000 residents mourned a woman they had accepted as their own and felt deeply insulted by the crime. During the investigation, Babish was offered to take a test to determine what language the bandits used when they communicated with him. He was able to identify it as Albanian, but this was not certain. After reviewing 150 photographs, Babish managed to narrow down the list of suspects to 10 people. There was an Albanian gang that had been involved in very brutal robberies, subjecting victims to torture and beatings, with similar cases occurring 6 months prior. The police intensified their efforts to find anyone connected to the gang, utilizing their findings and knowledge, as well as Babish's list of 10 suspects. They came across one specific person described by Babish as a broad-shouldered man, approximately 165 centimeters tall, with short blonde hair, a known brutal abuse with a history of hating women. The police began investigating potential connections between this individual and another suspect who had robbed the home of a pilot instructor in Babish's squad 3 years ago. Additionally, the police had another suspect named Yanis, who was also reported to be working with the gang. Soon after the funeral, a resident of Georgia attracted the attention of the authorities due to possessing a fake passport. After DNA samples were taken from him, it turned out he was involved in a home invasion, but it occurred at a different location and happened 4 days before the attack on Caroline's home. Both cases were later scrutinized. Significant differences led to the Georgian resident being eliminated as a suspect when nothing linked him to Caroline's apartment. At the same time, experts expressed concern, noting that as time went on, there was less hope of finding the culprit. Police sources told local media that there was so little evidence found in the house that it seemed as if the robbers had thoroughly cleaned the crime scene and erased their tracks before leaving. Caroline's husband was frequently called to the police station, and he obediently came with a mournful expression, conscientiously answering all of the investigators' many questions. The detectives studied the chronology of those days, the work schedules of Babish and Caroline. They sought as much information as possible about the couple and their relationship. Babish shared much information, but the diary found in the house painted a very different picture than what him presented. In her diary, Caroline described Babish as rude and cruel, revealing that she had been trying to leave him for a long time. Caroline first told her husband about her desire to leave in July 2020, when their daughter Lydia was born. She expressed that she had become increasingly unhappy and was searching for a new home. However, she began to doubt her decision, thinking about her daughter growing up in a single-parent family. Later, she wrote that Babish had control over her and had installed a tracking app on her phone. When Caroline attended therapy sessions, he could hear everything discussed. The couple's family consultant, Elaine, learned from Caroline that she was looking for an apartment in central Athens for herself and Lydia, near the culinary school she dreamed of attending. Despite often visiting a family psychologist with her husband's knowledge, one day, out of the blue, Caroline received a text from Elaine asking her to stop their sessions. She believes this is from the effects of Babish. According to entries in Caroline's diary, tensions were high, and the situation escalated quickly. One entry stated, "Today my baby turned 1 month old. It was also the day I told myself I wanted to leave. I feel terrible." Another entry read, "I am thinking of leaving for my sister, but I know that I can't leave my baby. This life hurts me." They say the psychologist encouraged Caroline to trust her mother, but she replied that she didn't want to disappoint her. Prosecutors claimed the murder was entirely intentional, pointing to the cameras being turned off before the killing and the memory cards being removed as calculated coincidences. 38 days after the scene of violence and robbery, during a memorial service for Caroline, police officers approached Babish with a request to come with them for another interrogation. Babish begged to wait until the service ended, but he was told this matter could not wait, as someone had been detained and his identification was needed. He was advised not to call anyone and to hide his phone while following them. This was actually a set-up, as the police needed Babish himself as a suspect. The entire situation was becoming increasingly confusing and hard to believe. Inconsistencies and discrepancies emerged. Based on Caroline's diary entries and Babish's story, the police realized they needed to focus on him rather than looking for a gang. When analyzing data from Caroline's smartwatch, they found that she had been in a state of extreme mental or physical stress for 6 minutes around 4 a.m., leading them to conclude that she died at a different time than what Babish claimed. Geolocation data from his phone indicated that Babish had been walking up and down the stairs of the house for several hours, just when he claimed he was tied up by gangsters and unable to move. After 8 hours of intense questioning and reviewing all the evidence the police had gathered, Babish finally broke down. He played the part for weeks, but now the police assert that the gang attack story was a lie and that he himself killed his wife because she threatened to leave him, then staged the crime scene. An examination of some evidence and digital data has provided clues. If the police are correct, then this crime comes down to the actions of one cruel husband. Babish admitted that the robbery was staged. The acts committed against Caroline and her beloved dog were horrific. The police noted that when they arrived at the crime scene on May 11th, they already had suspicions about Babish but lacked sufficient evidence. He had played a cunning game, cooperating with the press to manipulate the narrative of his grief, all while deceiving everyone. The police wondered if there was another potential motive for the murder: money. It turned out that Babish had led a very wasteful lifestyle. Recently, they had gone on a luxurious holiday, during which they spent a large sum of money. They also bought land and designed their dream home worth £14,000. There was also information that Babish had been involved in the transportation of banned substance, earning money for his luxurious lifestyle by transporting them via his helicopter. Caroline's father is sure that there is a lot of truth in this information, having studied the chronology of events and the data the police compiled. In Babish's testimony, what happened in the early morning of May 11th was concerning. At some point in the evening, Caroline texted her friend that she was leaving Babish. Data from her phone showed that she had been trying to book a hotel for herself for the next day, but she decided to spend that night at home. At 12:35 a.m., Babish was seen at their child's crib while Caroline was upstairs texting her friend. At 1:20 a.m., Babish took out the memory card from the CCTV camera inside the house. Then they started to quarrel over the text messages. According to this data, Caroline's pulse jumped 50% at 4:05 a.m. when Babish smothered her with a pillow. 5 to 6 minutes later, at 4:11 a.m. the watch stopped recording her heartbeat. He placed their young daughter next to her dead mother on the bed in an attempt to create a convincing and shocking crime scene. He then threw clothes around the house to stage a robbery. At one point, he also got rid of Caroline's pet husky. The finale of his scheme was tying himself up and taping himself. Just 2 hours later, at 6 a.m., Babish called to report a fake robbery. An expert stated that Caroline died in torment, and, with the help of her smartwatch, it became clear that she was resisting with all her might. In his speech in court, Babish described the strangulation of his wife as a hug. He claimed that Caroline tried to move away from him while they were lying in bed, so he held her tightly. When she tried to turn face down, he continued to hold her, pressing her hard against the pillow until she stopped moving. This continued for 5 minutes. Afterward, it seemed like Babish tried to stir her or wake her up, but it was in vain, and then he realized that it was all over. Babish claimed that he killed Caroline to protect his daughter. According to him, his wife was cruel, verbally abusive towards both him and Lydia, and he acted in the heat of the moment. He insisted that when he killed his wife, he had no intention of lying and that all his actions were driven by the desire to protect his daughter. This statement was considered very unfair and offensive to those who knew Caroline. Lydia was her life. Caroline idolized her child and would never have allowed harm to come to her baby. Babish Anagnostopoulos was charged with 2 serious crimes: first, murder in a completely calm mental state, and second, cruelty to animals. Additionally, he was accused of repeatedly giving false testimony, thus misleading the investigation. Although his lawyers worked to defend him and argued that the murder was committed under the influence of emotions, this should not affect the fair verdict of the court. The case has caused a public outcry and prompted protesters to march in the streets with signs and slogans declaring "No to domestic violence." On May 16, 2022, about a month after the trial began, a jury found Babish guilty of manslaughter while in a calm state, murder of a domestic animal, false reporting, and false testimony. He was sentenced to life in prison and an additional 10 years for the execution of a domestic dog, as well as a fine of €21,000. Additionally, Bobish received another year and 6 months for misleading the authorities. Caroline's parents wanted to erase all mention of Bobish from their memory in any way they could. They began by removing the word wife from the tombstone on Caroline's grave. It now reads mother and daughter, Caroline Crouch. They were also granted full custody of baby Lydia, while Bobish's parents were denied custody but allowed to visit their granddaughter 5 times a month. Despite everything, Bobish and Caroline's parents maintain a good relationship and work to ensure Lydia has a happy life. The Caroline Crouch case is not only a family tragedy but also a heartbreaking reminder of the reality of domestic violence hidden behind a perfect facade. More than a year after Caroline's tragic death on May 11, 2021, the sentence handed down to Bobish and Agnistopoulos has closed a painful chapter, bringing some measure of justice to her and her family, although it cannot erase the suffering they have endured. The life sentence and additional penalties not only punish Bobish's cruel actions but also send a strong message that such crimes will not be tolerated, regardless of how skillfully the perpetrators attempt to cover them up. For the Greek community and the world, this case has evoked deep sympathy and sparked a movement against domestic violence, urging people to reconsider the potential dangers in their own homes. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Natalie Connolly. Natalie Connolly is a charming and beautiful girl. She has a twin sister. The twins not only look alike, they are also very close. Natalie has a cheerful and sociable personality. She always brings joy to those around her and easily makes people laugh. As a single mother, Natalie has faced many challenges, but she has tried to give her daughter Madison everything she needs. She gives her love and care to her daughter. One day, in a crowded bar, Natalie meets John Broadhurst, a charming and sophisticated man who immediately catches her attention. Despite the age difference, John's charm and wit quickly capture Natalie's heart. Soon, they exchange contact information, eager to delve deeper into their budding relationship. As they spend more time together, Natalie finds herself irresistibly attracted to John from the moment they meet, even though she initially has no idea what he does for a living or how wealthy he is. As they became closer, John revealed that he was a millionaire, a fact that became apparent through his lavish displays of affection. He showered Natalie with expensive gifts and took her to lavish dinners at high-end restaurants. His large mansion looked like a fairy tale castle, and Natalie was charmed by his gentle and polite manner. However, beneath John's charming exterior, he hides many secrets. Over time, it becomes clear that his life is more complicated than he initially lets on. Between John's engagement to his pregnant fiancée and his expectation of their second child, John has been hiding the existence of 3 more children. His relationship with Natalie is revealed to be an affair. Continues even as he deals with the breakup of his previous relationship, eventually choosing to turn his attention to Natalie. At first, John and Natalie's romance seems like a fairy tale. John quickly becomes acquainted with her daughter Madison, and she easily wins the hearts of his children. John showers Natalie with lavish gifts and seems to make every dream imaginable come true. However, when Natalie moves into John's estate in Kinver, Staffordshire, England, their passionate relationship begins to fall apart as they begin to live together and share every moment of their lives. John enjoys rough and aggressive intimacy, similar to scenes in 50 Shades of Grey, which makes Natalie feel uncomfortable. He took pleasure in inflicting pain during intimate moments, often leaving visible evidence of his aggression in the form of bruises and cuts. Despite the initial romance and luxury of the relationship, Natalie began to see a darker reality in their relationship. She felt trapped and reluctant to comply with John's demands. Fearing abandonment, like his pregnant ex-fiancée, and fearing a return to her previous lonely life, she chose to stay and not leave. Natalie turns to her sister and mother for support, sharing with them the physical and emotional pain she suffered at the hands of John during their intense and often violent sexual encounters. Although John is adept at being a lover, Natalie cannot ignore the pain he frequently causes her. She struggles to reconcile her conflicting emotions, feeling caught between the pleasure she experiences with him and the hurt he causes her. The chaos leaves Natalie feeling stuck, unsure how to reconcile. As Natalie's dissatisfaction grew, she and John began to drift apart, both seeking new relationships outside of their marriage. John sought relationships with other women and Natalie texted other men. When John discovers Natalie chatting with other men, he becomes extremely angry. Although he himself had relationships with other women, he still felt uncomfortable with Natalie having relationships with other men. However, he hid his discomfort and instead suggested Natalie go out and eat together. On December 18, 2016, after a fun day of going out and having dinner at a favorite restaurant, John asked the driver to take them home. But behind the normal appearance, John had dark intentions. Natalie had drunk a lot of alcohol during dinner that night. When she returned home, she was disoriented, staggered out of the car, and unfortunately left her phone behind. When she entered the house, John had darker plans. After the driver returned and handed Natalie the phone, she endured John's brutal attacks. He violently attacked her, punching, kicking, stomping, and throwing bleach at her face and genitals. To add to her pain, he used a bottle of carpet cleaner as a weapon, spraying it on her from a hose. After completing his vicious attack, John heartlessly left Natalie at the bottom of the stairs, badly injured and bleeding profusely. She lay in a pool of blood as John retreated to his bed. When he awoke several hours later, he found Natalie dead, having suffered numerous horrific injuries. John's subsequent actions, including his unconvincing performance during the emergency call, expose his twisted mentality as he nonchalantly announces Natalie's situation to the rescue team. As the paramedics sadly carried Natalie's body into the ambulance, John stood there, emotionless, silently observing the tragic consequences of his actions. After Natalie was declared dead, he was arrested by the police. In an attempt to explain what had happened, John claimed that things had gone too far during rough sex. He insisted that Natalie had consented to everything they did, and that she had even requested the violent and brutal acts that led to her death. According to John's disturbing account, Natalie had wanted to be hurt, abused, and had a foreign object inserted into her body. He claimed that despite the blood and pain, she had told him that she was fine and wanted more, and that he was trying to blame her for her tragic death. John attempted to avoid responsibility by claiming that Natalie had willingly engaged in rough sex many times before without any problems. When asked why he had left her lying at the bottom of the stairs partially clothed, he gave an excuse, that the house was always warm. So he did not need to provide a blanket. John showed no remorse or apology, instead placing the blame squarely on Natalie. Surprisingly, his attempt at blame-shifting worked, much to the anger of many. Although he was convicted of manslaughter, he was given a relatively short sentence of 3 years and 8 months, and serving only 22 months before being released. Today, John Broadhurst walks among us, a stark reminder of the miscarriages of justice and the ongoing pain suffered by Natalie and her loved ones. The Natalie Connolly case has been widely criticized and controversial. Motivated Fiona McKenzie to launch the "We Can't Agree with This" movement in December 2018. McKenzie's initiative serves two purposes: to spark conversations about the widespread problem of sexual assault and to advocate for the removal of the rough sex defense. In Fiona's view, she believes that this defense justifies violence in intimate relationships and reinforces harmful stereotypes. However, McKenzie was surprised to discover that some individuals, despite disagreeing with the court's decision, accepted it. They believed that it was just an accident, not a sign of intentional homicide. Unfortunately, this way of thinking often leads to victim blaming, unfairly holding them responsible for the risks of their actions. The gross sexual homicide defense was explicitly banned with the passing of the Domestic Abuse Bill by Parliament on July 6, 2020. Following royal assent on April 29, 2021, the bill banned the gross sexual homicide defense, a significant step in tackling domestic violence. Offenders can no longer use this defense to justify their actions. Natalie's death has left a huge void in the lives of her family and friends, who are in shock and deeply saddened by her loss. Since her death, the community has come together to raise awareness of domestic violence and to help survivors heal and recover. Their kindness and solidarity has brought hope in the wake of a terrible tragedy. Although Natalie's life has ended, her memory will always remain with those who knew and loved her. Her story will inspire us to fight against domestic violence and help those in need. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Wilma Anderson. Wilma Anderson was born to Linda and Marcus Anderson after her parents divorced. Wilma moved in with her older sister Emily. Despite this difficult situation, Wilma's mother remained closely involved in her life. According to her mother Linda, Wilma was an active and ambitious girl who loved to socialize with people. She loved social media, often sharing photos of her life on Facebook, and enjoyed every opportunity to be captured in photos. At the age of 15, Wilma met Tishko Ahmed Shirzad, 20, in Sweden. Wilma's mother was concerned about her daughter dating someone older, but she trusted Wilma's choice and eventually accepted their relationship. Tishko, who is originally from Iraq, moved to Sweden at the age of 8 to live with her father and stepmother. He became a Swedish citizen in 2014 and eventually found a job in the care industry after completing his studies in 2018. Wilma and Tishko's relationship took a significant step forward when they moved in together in Uddevalla, Sweden. At first, things went smoothly, but over time, their relationship changed and became increasingly troubled. Tishko began to become more controlling, which Wilma's mother noticed, a change in her daughter's behavior during the 2 years Wilma lived with Tishko. Wilma often spoke to her sister Emily about the problems she was having with Tishko. On November 14, 2019, Wilma spoke to Emily on the phone when she went to Tishko's apartment to collect her belongings. During the call, Wilma expressed her intention to end her relationship with Tishko, citing his excessive control over her life. She felt suffocated by his behavior, dictating what she wore, where she went, who she saw, and even how she applied her makeup. Feeling suffocated by his domineering and abusive behavior, she had had enough and just wanted it to end. When Tishko returned home from work, Wilma ended the call. Emily then tried to contact Wilma, but she was unable to reach her. The next day, November 15th, Wilma missed a scheduled dentist appointment. 2 days later, on November 17th, Wilma's parents visited the apartment she shared with her boyfriend. After knocking on the door, a moment later, the door slowly opened and they saw Tishko. Linda was worried and asked Tishko where Wilma was. Tishko told them that he and Wilma had broken up and that she had left after packing her things. He claimed that he did not know where she was and did not expect to see her again. Linda and her husband went into the apartment to try to find out more information by talking to Tishko. Tishko told them what had happened that night, saying that he and Wilma had gotten into a big argument when he got home from work at 5:30 p.m., which ended with Wilma leaving him. Wilma's parents were not too concerned about her absence at first, as her relationship with Tishko was often argumentative and unstable. However, Wilma's sister, Emily, became increasingly concerned and turned to Facebook for help. In her post, Emily explained that Wilma had been missing since November 14th and had not contacted her family, which was unusual for her. Emily described Wilma as being 165 centimeters tall with black hair with blonde highlights. She stressed that this disappearance was out of character for Wilma and expressed her deep concern for her sister's safety. The police were involved, taking a report and starting to collect statements from family and friends. Their goal was to reconstruct her recent activities and interactions. They interviewed those who had last seen or spoken to her. Linda and Emily confirmed that they had not had contact with Wilma since November 14th, noting that their attempts to call her had gone unanswered. A search party was organized, combining the efforts of the police with those of her friends and family, using dogs and drone technology to scan inaccessible areas for any traces. When police questioned Tishko, he denied knowing where Wilma was and said he had not heard from her recently. By Sunday, November 17th, 3 days after Wilma went missing, there was still no sign of her. This was especially worrying because Wilma, who posted frequently on social media, had been completely inactive for an unusually long period of time. The situation became more urgent, prompting some 5,000 people to join the search for her. Police continued to question Tishko, seeking more information, but he maintained that he had no knowledge of Wilma's whereabouts. He claimed that after they broke up, she had moved on to someone else. However, there was no evidence to support this, leaving her loved ones confused and worried. At the same time, Wilma's family revealed a heartbreaking story to the police, lamenting how their daughter's life had taken a drastic turn since she became involved with Tishko, creating a bleak contrast to her once vibrant and sociable self. Linda revealed that Tishko had complete control over her, constantly telling her what to do and monitoring her every move. Emily shared some disturbing information that Wilma had told her. It was clear that Tishko had become violent in their relationship. Despite the abuse, Wilma still had strong feelings for Tishko. Tishko's level of control was so extreme that he even attached a GPS tracking device to Wilma's phone, allowing him to know her location at all times. A series of text messages between Wilma and Tishko revealed a disturbing control in their relationship. An exchange from a previous argument showed that Wilma had asked Tishko to contact her when he felt he could trust her. As part of the investigation, police looked into Tishko's alibi for the time. Tishko claimed he had been in the apartment after returning from work at 5 p.m. To verify this, police tracked Tishko's movements using GPS tracking on his phone. Surveillance footage showed Tishko at the supermarket at 2:30 p.m. on the day Wilma went missing. He returned home from work at 5 p.m. Around 6 p.m., neighbors reported a loud and escalating argument between the couple, louder than their usual disagreements. A concerned neighbor decided to check on them but was met with an unsettling silence as they approached the apartment door. The sudden silence was unnerving, and the neighbor, not knowing what to do, returned to their apartment. Police continued to investigate Wilma's disappearance, carefully analyzing Tishko's activities. They expanded their search to his workplace and company vehicle, requesting forensic analysis. The car's GPS showed that he had been traveling from Thursday, the 14th, to Monday, the 18th. The GPS log showed that he visited clients and returned home during his regular work hours on those days. On the day of the dispute, Tishko's phone showed that he left his apartment at 6:30 p.m. Witnesses saw him walking along the highway, alone and dressed all in black. A motorcyclist described Tishko as deep in thought about something. Tishko was stopped by police and taken home. When questioned, Tishko said he had initially wanted to catch a train, but then changed his mind and walked home. Curiously, the police did not file a report after the encounter. On November 19, 2019, while the investigation was still ongoing, police noticed that he had visible scratches on his forearms. After obtaining a search warrant for his apartment, police found several of Wilma's belongings, including a handbag, jacket, shoes, and eyeglasses. Wilma's mother, Linda, said her daughter always carried the bag with her, making the discovery even more suspicious. Police examined the scene with Blue Star, a high-tech version of luminol. The results revealed ominous bloodstains on the walls and floors throughout the apartment, suggesting a violent struggle. As police reconstructed the events, a chilling story began to emerge. Bloodstains stretched from the living room to the bedroom, suggesting something, or someone, had been dragged. Even the bed bore a dark imprint, a haunting shape of a torso highlighted by the bright light of the blue star. Police also discovered muscle tissue on a knife and blood splatter on the living room wall. The large amount of blood found at the scene indicated a violent incident, making the possibility of survivors very low. When police searched outside the apartment, they discovered trash bags containing Tishko's bed sheets with blood stains on them. When questioned at the police station, Tishko denied knowing anything about the blood stains and said he would have noticed if there had been more blood in his house. As the search for Wilma continued, more and more people joined in, hoping to find her and provide a glimmer of hope amid the growing tragedy. The apartment where Wilma was last seen became a grim crime scene, but attempts to find her were unsuccessful. On November 28, 2 weeks after Wilma went missing, police brought in sniffer dogs to help search the crime scene. These specially trained dogs can detect the scent of a dead person. When they entered the bedroom, one of the dogs quickly indicated that there was a possibility of a corpse or human remains. The apartment was also filled with a distinct and unpleasant odor. Although the police had searched the bedroom before, they searched thoroughly again, focusing on the area the dogs had marked. They focused on a dresser, which appeared to be just another piece of furniture in the room, but inside the otherwise innocuous dresser was a small travel suitcase, which seemed inconspicuous among the other items in the room. After opening it, they discovered a large object wrapped in kitchen foil inside the suitcase. When they opened the foil, they were met with a horrifying and heartbreaking truth. Wilma's severed head had been carefully wrapped and tied with tape inside the foil. The travel case, containing evidence of Wilma's horrific events, was sent to the Gothenburg Forensic Laboratory for further examination. A detailed examination revealed Tishko's fingerprints, which linked him to the heinous act. The investigation revealed the shocking brutality of the crime. Although pathologists were unable to determine Wilma's exact cause of death, they discovered severe injuries to her head and eyes caused by blunt force trauma. The decapitation had also caused further head injuries. Wilma's family was devastated by her news. Her mother, Linda, joined the search efforts for the rest of Wilma's body. The family was confronted with horrifying details of the case, including evidence found on the walls of the apartment. It became clear that Wilma's final moments may have taken place in the living room, where she was violently attacked. A severe blow to the head ended her life, leaving a haunting reminder of the violence. Swedish police filed a report detailing Tishko's denial of Wilma's murder, strongly asserting his innocence. Despite Tishko's claims, police had enough evidence to charge him with the crime and his trial was set for May 2020. However, Wilma's body was not found during the trial. Tishko showed no remorse or emotion throughout the investigation. Reports revealed that he had a disturbing view of his ex-girlfriend, associating her with evil and making bizarre claims that she was working with the Democrats against then U.S. President Donald Trump. Tishko's bizarre obsession with the president led him to attempt to join Trump's campaign. But his application was rejected due to incomplete records. During his trial, his defense team attempted to argue that he was not guilty by reason of insanity, citing his bizarre beliefs and statements about Wilma as evidence. However, this defense was unsuccessful. On July 27, 2020, a court found Tishko Ahmed Shirzad, 23, guilty of the murder of 17-year-old Wilma Anderson and sentenced him to life in prison, which was later reduced to 18 years by an appeals court. The inexplicable reduction in sentence stems from the lack of concrete evidence to pinpoint the exact cause of Wilma's death or the course of events since her body was not there, a haunting absence that leaves important questions unanswered, hindering the pursuit of justice. In 2020, Wilma's funeral marked the sad end to her story, causing immense pain for her family. Hey detectives! Welcome back. we've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Neil Entwistle. Neil Entwistle was born on September 18, 1978 in Worksop, Nottinghamshire, England. His parents, Clifford and Yvonne Entwistle, raised him and his younger brother Russell in a small house. His father, Clifford, worked as a coal miner before becoming a labor consultant, and his mother, Yvonne, worked as a cook in the school canteen. After finishing high school, Neil attended York University to study electrical engineering and business management. While at the university, he met Rachel Souza, an American student studying abroad. From Kingston, Massachusetts. Rachel attended Silver Lake Regional High School and later transferred to Holy Cross College in Worcester. During her year at York University, she joined the rowing team, where she met Neil. Described as reserved and unsociable, Neil impressed his friends with his calm demeanor. Rachel, on the other hand, was outgoing, and her American background added to her charm. As a result, she was popular while on the rowing team. Neil and Rachel spent more time together, and they became closer. Neil and Rachel found themselves attracted to each other. Neil worked at a defense and security technology company in Malvern, Worcestershire. Meanwhile, Rachel pursued a career in education. After completing her studies in 2002, she became an English drama and theater teacher at St. Augustine's Catholic High School in Redditch. Neil shared a post on Friends Reunited in June 2003, joking that his job was making bombs and other things for a living. He also expressed his happiness about his upcoming wedding to Rachel, whom he called the most wonderful woman in the world. They met through sailing and formed a deep bond. Although he said he felt a little unhappy living south of the border in Birmingham, he was excited about his future with Rachel. In August 2003, the couple married in 2 ceremonies, one in Plymouth, UK, and one in Massachusetts, USA. Following the ceremony in the US, they had a reception in the UK. Neil created a family website where he shares updates about their life in Worcester. The couple's daughter, Lillian Rose, was born in April 2005, leading to their decision to move to the US. They initially lived with Rachel's mother, Priscilla Matarazzo, and stepfather, Joseph, in Carver, Massachusetts, before moving to their own home in Hopkinton on January 12, 2006. Their new home, located on a quiet cul-de-sac with only 8 neighbors, offers a quiet setting just a short walk from the nearest major city. The 5-bedroom home rents for $1,500 a month, which is quite expensive. Neil, a computer programmer and IT professional, is having trouble finding work, which is causing financial stress and debt. To ease his financial burden, Neil turns to selling PC parts on eBay. However, his business is affected by customer complaints about undelivered orders, which brings in eBay's fraud investigators. During the proceedings, it is discovered that Neil has been using multiple accounts under different names. During this time, Neil runs a website called millimaker.co.uk. The site promoted a get-rich-quick scheme targeting those in the adult entertainment industry, offering 24/7 support. The site promised a guaranteed monthly profit of $6,000 within the first 6 months. However, the site was eventually shut down. At the same time, Neil was using online platforms to find sexual partners. He visited sites such as Adult Friend Finder, Half-Price Escorts, Nightlife, and Hot Local Euro Escorts for this purpose. Neil created a profile on Adult Friend Finder and emailed several women, saying he was looking for sexual partners. Investigators found incriminating content on his laptop, including a profile in which he mentioned wanting to meet American women of various ages to confirm rumors about their sexual prowess. His profile suggested a straightforward and mutually beneficial approach to meeting like-minded people. During his trial, Neil revealed that he had searched online for blondes, suggesting that he was still interested in such services. His online searches, most recently on January 18, 2006, included terms such as Worcester Escort Services and Worcester Escorts on Google. However, Neil's actions were not simply a search for escorts and other women. Neil conducted an alarming array of online searches. He searched for terms such as knife to the throat, kill, and how to kill with a knife. These searches were interspersed with more conventional searches for employment opportunities, travel, and ways to make quick money. Additionally, during this time, Neil traveled to Carver to visit his father-in-law, Joe Matarazzo. Joe was a member of the Old Colony Sporting Club in Carver. After being taught how to shoot by Joe, Neil planned to steal a gun from Joe's collection at their home in Carver, Massachusetts. He went to his parents-in-law's home, retrieved the weapon from a storage location in the home, and drove back to Hopkinton with the gun in hand. Upon returning home, he discreetly hid the gun, waiting for the opportunity to commit a tragic act of violence against his family, before ending his own life. On January 20th, 2006, Neil entered the bedroom where his wife Rachel and 9-month-old daughter Lillian were sleeping. He shot Rachel, 27, in the head, then shot Lillian, who was lying next to her. The bullet passed through Lillian's body and into Rachel's left chest. That same day, while his wife's family was still at work, he returned to Carver, returning the weapon without cleaning it. After leaving Carver, Neil went to Logan Airport in Boston. That evening, January 20th, 2006, he withdrew a total of $800 from an ATM in 2 transactions. However, a third attempt to withdraw an additional $420 was rejected. The next day, Saturday, January 21st, 2006, Neil purchased a one-way ticket to London without luggage. At around 5 p.m., he boarded a British Airways flight, which departed from Boston at 8:15 p.m. That Saturday evening, Neil had invited some neighbors over for dinner. Joanna Gatley and her sister Maureen arrived at around 7 p.m. and found the house locked, but the lights were still on inside. Worried, they tried to call Rachel's mother, but were unable to reach her. Panicking, they decided to call 911 for assistance. The police quickly arrived at Neil's house at around 8:30 p.m. Upon entering the house, Sergeant Michael Sutton observed the scene, noticing inside the bedroom was a large, unmade bed with all the clothes piled in the middle of the bed. Except for the unmade bed, everything else in the house appeared to be in order. After completing the search, the police locked the house and left to continue patrolling. Although the police continued to search, Joanna and Maureen were still extremely worried about Rachel's family. They decided to spend the night in the car, waiting for the family to return. Despite the cold, they made several trips to the gas station bathroom during the night, anxiously waiting for any news. The next morning, Sunday, the sisters gained access to the house using the garage door code they had obtained from a neighbor the night before. When they entered the house, they found evidence that the family had just finished eating, with dishes and leftovers in the kitchen. The bathtub was still full of water, indicating that the parents had just bathed their newborn daughter. They went into the master bedroom, then to Lillian's bathroom, where classical music was playing, and finally to the living room. After Rachel's mother and stepfather arrived, they assessed the situation together and decided to report the family missing to the Hopkinton Police Department. Sergeant Michael returned to the house for a second search. This time, when he entered the basement, he noticed a strong, unpleasant odor that had not been there the day before. He followed the smell through the house until he reached the master bedroom. There, he found the bodies of Rachel and Lillian on the unmade bed, covered in clothes. Rachel's arms were stretched out across Lillian's chest, and her legs were drawn up beside her daughter. Both were wearing pajamas. An autopsy later revealed that Rachel had been shot in the head and Lillian in the torso. Further investigation found Rachel's DNA on the barrel of the gun and Neil's DNA on the stock. Neil Entwistle, 27, was initially listed as a missing person. Michael Fabry, Assistant District Attorney for Middlesex County, stated that the main priority on the first night was to find Neil as his location and condition were unknown, raising concerns for his safety. About 36 hours after returning to England, Neil visited his parents, Clifford and Yvonne. He had driven and spent the previous night at a hotel. During the visit, he told his parents that he had found the bodies of his wife and daughter. On Monday, January 23, 2006, Neil had a 2-hour telephone conversation with State Police Constable Robert Manning of the Hopkinton Police Department. The conversation was recorded and later played back in full during the court proceedings. Neil explained that after finding the bodies, he became extremely frightened and quickly went to his family. He told police that he had covered the bodies with sheets and then thought of the knives in the house. He picked up a large knife and stabbed himself, but was too afraid of the pain to use it. Neil appeared confused as to why he did not call an ambulance. Neil could not bring himself to use a knife to harm himself. He told police that he then drove the family car to his father-in-law Joe Matarazzo's house to retrieve a .22 LR revolver. However, he found the house locked. Rather than explore other options, Neil decided to fly back to England to stay with his parents. On January 26, 2006, U.S. police arrived in the UK to question Neil. The following day, January 27, after speaking to a lawyer at his parents' home, Neil refused to meet with U.S. police at the U.S. Embassy in London. Rachel and her daughter Lillian were buried at Evergreen Cemetery in Kingston, Massachusetts, under the surname Souza. They were buried together in a coffin. About 500 people attended the funeral, but Neil was absent. His name was not mentioned at the service and is not inscribed on their joint headstone. Instead, Neil sent a bouquet of flowers consisting of an orange rose and a white lily with a note attached to a ribbon. The note read, "My orange roses and lilies forever," and was signed Sakoko. Upon his return to England, Neil appeared to have returned to his usual routine. In February 2006, despite the constant media attention outside his parents' home in Waltham, he attended a dinner in Notting Hill with his old crew from York University. About a week after Rachel and Lillian's funerals, he also went to the movies. On February 8, 2006, the Middlesex District Attorney's Office issued a warrant for Neil's arrest. The following day, Neil was arrested by London's Metropolitan Police at Royal Oak Station as he prepared to board a train. At the time of his arrest, Neil had a notebook in which he planned to sell his story to the highest bidder. The notebook also included affectionate notes about his orange rose and a person named Lily. Neil referred to his wife as "my dearest and most beloved friend" in the notebook. He also wrote 2 letters to the editor sharing his story and had contacted a close friend about his plans. In one of the letters, Neil asked about the amount of money he might receive for sharing his entire story exclusively. Neil chose not to contest the extradition order. On February 15, he was returned to the United States and appeared in Framingham County Court. The court ordered him held without bail at the Middlesex County Jail in Cambridge, Massachusetts. On March 28, 2006, Neil was formally charged with 2 counts of murder, as well as illegal possession of a firearm and ammunition. He pleaded not guilty to these charges. In December 2006, nearly a year after the tragic incident, Middlesex County Jail police found letters Neil had written to his parents and attorney. The letters revealed his struggles with depression and hinted that he may have been thinking about ending his life. As a result, he was temporarily transferred to Bridgewater Hospital for a psychiatric evaluation before being returned to Middlesex County Jail. Forensic psychiatrist Christopher Cordless believed that Neil's behavior was the result of Asperger's syndrome, a view also shared by Dr. David Holmes. After several delays, jury selection for the trial in Middlesex Superior Court began in June 2008. Concerns arose over the high-profile nature of the case and whether Neil would receive a fair trial. The trial officially began on June 2, 2008, in Wrentham, Massachusetts. Elliot Weinstein led Neil's defense team. During the trial, Weinstein attempted to block the prosecution from using DNA evidence, but was unsuccessful. He also attempted to exclude other evidence found in the family home because the police did not have a warrant, but this effort was also unsuccessful. Neil chose not to call any witnesses or testify in his own defense. Those who attended the trial noted that Neil showed little emotion throughout the trial. On June 25, 2008, Neil Entwistle was convicted of first-degree murder, as well as possession of a firearm and ammunition without a license. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. After the trial, Neil told family and friends in court not to worry, saying, "I'll be fine." He was initially sent to the Sousa Baranowski Correctional Center. However, in August 2008, Neil shaved his head, thinking it would protect him from a white supremacist gang in prison. But instead of protecting him, the gang said they would kill him and viewed his actions as a futile attempt to gain their favor. As a result, Neil was transferred to protective custody for his own safety. Then, in December, Neil was transferred to the Old Colony Correctional Center, a medium-security prison in Bridgewater, Massachusetts. The transfer was made for his own safety due to threats against his life, according to the Department of Corrections. The deaths of Rachel and her infant daughter had a profound impact on their family and friends. In the wake of the loss, the community rallied to offer support and comfort to her grieving family. The story of Neil Entwistle and Rachel Sousa is a heartbreaking reminder that even people who appear to have perfect lives can be hiding difficulties. Hopefully, the stories of Rachel and her daughter will help us to stay vigilant and to cherish the time we have with our loved ones. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Michelle Avila. Michelle Yvette Avila, people often call her Missy, was born on February 8, 1968, and grew up in Arleta, Los Angeles, with her mother and 3 brothers. She attended San Fernando High School, where she met her 2 best friends, Karen Severson and Laura Doyle. Michelle and Karen's close relationship began in childhood, but the two grew distant during high school. Michelle was known for her beauty and impressive long hair, which made her popular and well-liked among her peer group. Karen and Laura began to feel jealous because Michelle received a great deal of attention from others, especially boys. During Michelle's sophomore year, a rumor began to spread that she had relationships with many boys, all of whom had their own girlfriends. This rumor angered a group of girls who confronted Michelle outside the school. They brutally attacked her when she returned home. As a result of this brutal act, her attackers were brought to justice. The leader of the group was reported to be Sonia Bon. Michelle's parents immediately reported the ringleader of the attack. Michelle was scheduled to testify in court on October 8, 1985, but unfortunately, she never made it to court. In early September, Michelle had an argument with Karen and Laura, 2 of her close friends. The conflict arose from a rumor that had been circulating for over a year, accusing Michelle of having an affair with the boyfriend of one of them. Michelle then began dating a man named Randy at the start of her junior year, but their relationship lasted only about a month before she decided to end it. The reason for the breakup was Randy's constant partying, which Michelle could no longer tolerate. However, after breaking up with Michelle, Randy began dating Karen, and the 2 even moved in together after just a month. Despite this, Randy seemed to still have feelings for Michelle, as he frequently flirted with her, which made Karen unhappy. Michelle rejected Randy and informed him that she did not want to rekindle their relationship. Wanting to help Karen, Michelle advised her to consider ending her relationship with Randy and finding a better boyfriend. However, this advice angered Karen. As a result, Karen and Laura started spreading rumors again and decided to confront Michelle at a local park. During the confrontation, Michelle tried to appease Karen and Laura, reminding them that a similar situation had occurred the previous year and that she would never deliberately hurt them. Karen had argued with Michelle 10 days before she was murdered. During that argument, Karen yelled at Michelle, threatened her with a broken beer bottle, and pushed her to the ground before leaving with Laura. However, Laura later apologized to Michelle, and the two set aside their differences to continue their friendship. Karen did not contact Michelle for a while, but on October 1st, she sincerely apologized for her earlier behavior. This meant a lot to Michelle because she missed her friends, so the three of them decided to meet up at Stonehurst Park later that day. On October 1st, 1985, Michelle told her mother that she planned to go out with her friends. After gaining her mother's approval, on the condition that she be home by 6 p.m., Michelle went outside to wait for Laura to pick her up. When Laura arrived, they drove around before deciding to stop at Stonehurst Park. After parking, they waited for Karen to arrive. A few minutes later, Karen pulled into the parking lot, with Eva, their other friend, in the passenger seat. That's when things got worse for Michelle. When Karen pulled into the parking lot, she stopped very close to Laura's car and began to get angry. She rolled down her window and started yelling at Laura, using vulgar and abusive language. Laura also rolled down her window and responded to Karen with equally harsh language. Michelle and Eva sat in silence, watching their friend DS argue heatedly. Michelle had no idea what they were arguing about. Suddenly, Karen backed up and sped out of the parking lot, with Laura following closely behind. For 45 minutes, they drove at a high pace north of the city and into the mountains. Karen and Laura were driving so furiously that Michelle and Eva had to beg them to calm down and stop. The two girls finally drove to a parking lot that led to a large forest. Laura and Karen got out of the car, and an argument broke out, which escalated into a physical fight. Michelle also got out of the car in an attempt to stop her friends. However, as Michelle left the car, Karen and Laura suddenly stopped fighting and turned towards her. They were so close to Michelle that she could neither get back into the car nor move away from it. Karen smiled at Michelle and said that she and Laura were not arguing and were not angry with each other, but instead, they were angry with her. They informed her that the whole drama was just a ruse to lure her into the woods so they could confront her and punish her. They yelled at Michelle, revealing that they were the ones who spread the rumor because they were convinced that she had slept with their boyfriends, and they would not let her get away with it. Michelle tried to plead and convince them, insisting that she would never do such a thing and that she had never had sex with anyone, but they refused to listen. When Michelle started to remain quiet, Karen and Laura grabbed her and pushed her down a path into the woods. Michelle was very small, only 4 feet 10 inches tall and weighing 95 pounds, while Karen was 5 feet 2 inches tall and weighed over 200 pounds, and Laura was 5 feet 6 inches tall and weighed 135 pounds. Michelle was unable to defend herself against them. Then they repeatedly forced her to go further down the trail. Eva, on the other hand, stayed in the car the whole time the altercation occurred. Eventually, she got out of the car and started walking behind the group. Eva had not participated in any of the girls' actions in the woods, and she did not even know why they were taking Michelle in the first place. As the group left the parking area and headed deeper into the woods, Laura stopped and confronted Michelle, who was crying helplessly and fearfully. Laura punched Michelle in the face, and Karen immediately joined in the beating. In a matter of seconds, Michelle was beaten, punched, and stomped, lying motionless on the ground. When the group stopped, Laura took a knife and cut off chunks of Michelle's hair. They did this intentionally because they knew Michelle loved her long, beautiful hair. Karen wanted to join in the cutting but didn't have a knife, so she simply pulled at each strand of hair with her hands. Eva stood and watched everything unfold. After they finished cutting, they tied Michelle's hands behind her back and gagged her. Since they were about 10 feet away from a river, Laura walked down to the stream, looked directly at Michelle, splashed the W. a tear, and began teasing her, asking her to get into the water with her. When Michelle refused to budge, Karen grabbed Michelle and pulled her up, then pushed Michelle towards the river, causing her to fall down. With her hands tied behind her back, Michelle's face hit the ground, and she rolled into the river. Laura and Karen had held her body under 8 inches of water. When Michelle suddenly broke free from Karen's grasp and lifted her head above water, Eva heard her scream. After Michelle screamed, Karen grabbed her head and pushed her under the water. When the girls realized that Michelle was almost drowning, they let her go and ran to a large log, then brought it over and placed it on Michelle's head. Laura and Karen grabbed her and pulled her into the water, forcing Eva to run back down the trail to the cars. When she reached the parking lot, Eva realized that both cars were locked and they were too far away to call for help. She was forced to start walking back down the trail. After a while, she heard a terrifying scream. She stopped, returned to the car, and lay down on the ground in a fetal position, waiting for about an hour for the girls to return. Finally, she saw Laura and Karen, soaked and smiling happily. However, Michelle was not with them. After leaving the woods, they got into the car with Eva and headed home. For hours after the ordeal, Laura called Michelle's mother and asked to speak with her. When Michelle's mother, Irene Avila, said she thought her daughter was with Laura, Laura claimed she had dropped Michelle off with 3 boys in a blue Camaro after getting gas. Laura stated that she returned to the spot where she had dropped Michelle off, but both Michelle and the 3 boys were gone. On October 4, 1985, Michelle's body was found face down in a stream in Big Tujunga Canyon in the Angeles National Forest. 3 days later, a group of hikers contacted the police. When the police arrived, they discovered that Michelle had drowned in water only 8 inches deep. Her waist-length hair had been cut off, and a 4-foot-long log was found on her body. Police also found cigarettes, beer, and men's overalls near the location where Michelle's body was discovered. Detectives investigated the case based on the girls' statements that Michelle had been traveling with 3 men in a blue Camaro before she disappeared. This would explain some of the random items found around the crime scene. However, this statement led detectives to be misled and to search for men who did not exist for 3 years. Additionally, Irene later stated that she did not suspect Karen or Laura of being involved in her daughter's death, as both attended Michelle's funeral, and Laura even sent the family a condolence card along with $20. Karen moved in with Michelle's family for an extended period, showing her support and sympathy for them. She did her best to help catch the killers. In reality, however, Karen wanted to keep a close eye on the investigation and tried to avoid investigators as much as possible. Karen even slept in Michelle's bed and shared dinner with her family on several occasions. However, Karen was one of the girls responsible for Michelle's death. Karen also appeared to be haunted by the murder, visiting Michelle's grave several times a week and decorating her room with pictures of Michelle and newspaper articles about the case. She often went to the creek where Michelle's body was found. Once, Karen told Irene that she had seen Michelle's ghost. Detectives had no leads on the case until 3 years later, on July 26, 1988, when Eva drove 45 minutes into the mountains and turned herself into the police, revealing the entire story. She explained the rumors that had been circulating, the discord that had occurred among them, all the anger and jealousy, as well as every detail of the murder that she knew. Eva mentioned that it took her so long to come forward because Karen and Laura had threatened her, warning her not to say a word about anything she had seen, for fear they would kill her. In March 1990, Karen and Laura were convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to 15 years to life in prison. The jury later stated that they did not believe the murder was premeditated and dismissed the first-degree murder charge. Karen Severson was released on December 9, 2011, after serving 21.5 years, and Laura Doyle was released in December 2012 after serving 22 years. Karen Severson attempted to profit from writing a memoir about the murder and her life in prison, but her book did not sell well. She also appeared to have reached an agreement to make a movie about the murder, but Avila's family sued her in 2015, seeking to take profits from the sale of the work. As a result, the state of California passed Michelle's law, which requires organizations that support the publication of works by criminals to contact the families of victims regarding such works. Michelle's story has sparked discussions about the effects of bullying, the complexities of teen relationships. Community initiatives and support networks have emerged to provide resources and support to those affected by similar experiences. As we remember Michelle, we honor her memory by working to create a world where friendships are built on trust and compassion. Her legacy serves as a reminder that every individual deserves respect, kindness, and the opportunity to live a life free from harm. Ultimately, Michelle Yvette "Missy" Avila's legacy will be one of courage and optimism. Hopefully, her memory will inspire us all to stand up against bullying, support those who have been betrayed, and work toward a future where understanding and empathy are prioritized. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Mackenzie Lueck. Mackenzie Lueck was born on March 8, 1996. Her father, Gregory Lueck, worked in healthcare logistics and administration, while her mother, Diana, was a homemaker. She grew up in El Segundo, Los Angeles County, California, with an older brother and two younger brothers. Mackenzie attended El Segundo High School, where she was on the swim team and played water polo. She was a dedicated student with a passion for art, music, and animals. After graduating, she enrolled at the University of Utah, majoring in kinesiology and nursing. She was also involved in the Alpha Kappa Omega sorority. While at the University of Utah, she expressed her support for women's rights and later left one of the major political parties to join a third conservative party. Mackenzie works at a biotesting company in Salt Lake City. She recalls the days when she biked to the Pacific Ocean, wearing a bikini and sunbathing in the high desert. She plans to pursue a career in the healthcare field, is considering nursing or medical school, and is scheduled to graduate in May 2020. The Lueck family was typical, but everything changed on June 17, 2019, when Mackenzie returned to Salt Lake City after her grandmother's funeral. Early on the morning of June 17, around 2 a.m., Mackenzie texted her mother after landing at Salt Lake City International Airport from California, "Landed and love you, Mom." However, when Diana tried to contact Mackenzie again, she realized that her daughter's phone was turned off. Gregory also called Mackenzie, but it went straight to voicemail, leaving the Lueck family worried about her well-being. On June 20th, Mackenzie's parents discovered that her friends had not heard from her either. They reported Mackenzie missing to the Salt Lake City Police Department. Over the next 2 weeks, Mackenzie's family attempted to track her down from California. Members of Mackenzie's Alpha Kappa Omega sorority began searching for her in Utah. Together, they created a Find Mackenzie Lueck Facebook page to bring national media attention to the matter. Investigators are working to figure out what happened. They have video evidence showing Mackenzie at the airport. She was then taken by a Lyft driver to Hatch Park in North Salt Lake, about 13 miles from the airport. Investigators have also verified Mackenzie's cell phone information, confirming that she was at the park. Detectives have discovered that Mackenzie had been exchanging text messages with a stranger named Iola Ajayi. Mackenzie is believed to have met Iola through a dating website and agreed to meet. The last text message Mackenzie sent to Iola was at 2:58 a.m. Cell phone data showed that both Mackenzie and Iola were at Hatch Park, and at 2:59 a.m., Mackenzie's phone stopped transmitting location data, indicating that her phone was turned off. Detectives then tracked Iola's cell phone signal, leading them from the park to his home at 547 North 1000 West in the Fair Park neighborhood. Investigators determined that Iola's cell phone was at his home at 3:07 a.m., just 7 to 8 minutes after he picked up Mackenzie from the park. Based on this evidence, detectives decided to execute a search warrant at Iola's home because he was considered a prime suspect in Mackenzie's disappearance. During the search of Iola's residence, a neighbor reported a terrible odor coming from a gasoline-fueled campfire in Iola's backyard, next to a garage, on June 17th and 18th. Investigators impounded Iola's vehicle when they detected a strong odor of gasoline and found a red gasoline can in the trunk. They determined that Iola had purchased a similar can of gasoline at a local store on the morning of Mackenzie's disappearance, at 9 a.m. After Iola was arrested, investigators analyzed his cell phone records and located the phone in Logan Canyon, where Iola admitted to his attorney that he had buried Mackenzie's body on June 25th, between 2:30 p.m. and 4:30 p.m. Detectives conducted a thorough investigation of the area and discovered a disturbed dirt in a wooded area near a major road. There, they found the charred remains of a person. An autopsy conducted on July 3rd identified the body as that of Mackenzie Lueck. She had been bound with rope behind her back. The medical examiner determined the cause of death to be blunt force trauma to the left side of the skull and ruled her death a homicide. On October 7, 2020, Iola was convicted of first-degree murder and third-degree indignity in connection with Mackenzie's death. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole and an additional 5 years in prison for the indignity to Mackenzie's body. Iola was also charged with kidnapping another woman he met on a dating app in March 2018. The victim turned herself in after Iola was arrested for Mackenzie's murder. On October 7, 2020, Iola pleaded guilty to second-degree sexual abuse in connection with that case and was later sentenced to 1 to 15 years in prison. Iola was charged with 19 counts of sexual exploitation of a minor. These charges arose in August 2019, after police discovered multiple images of child pornography on his computer during the investigation into Mackenzie's death. The images, allegedly depicting children between the ages of 4 and 8, were discovered on July 2nd. Iola pleaded not guilty on October 1, 2020, and the charges related to the obscene act were later dismissed. The tragic loss of Mackenzie Lueck has shocked her loved ones and the nation. Her bright smile, zest for life, and dream of making a difference were taken from her in a senseless way. Nevertheless, Mackenzie's loved ones have come together to remember and honor her life. Her sorority friends remember her as a shining light, always ready to help and encourage. Through her art, music, and love for animals, Mackenzie's spirit lives on. Her story serves as a reminder to be vigilant and cautious, especially when engaging in online dating services. But more importantly, it reminds us of the value of life and the importance of cherishing every moment. Rest in peace, Mackenzie Lueck. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Tara Baker. Tara Louise Baker was born on January 20, 1977, in East Point, Georgia. Her parents got divorced when she was a child, and her mother later married again. Tara had 2 younger brothers and a younger sister, making her the eldest of 4 siblings. From an early age, Tara showed a strong interest in the law and aspired to be a lawyer or judge. She demonstrated this by conducting mock trials with her stuffed animals, creating contracts with family members, and she also writing letters to politicians. She even wrote to the President of the United States once to complain about his speech interrupting her favorite TV show. After graduating from high school, Tara attended Georgia College, where she earned 2 bachelor's degrees in just 3 years, graduating early. She then enrolled at the University of Georgia in 1999 to pursue further education. The university, located in Athens, was one of the top law schools in the country and was conveniently close to her parents' home. Just a few hours away. Because not wanting to live in a dorm again, Tara opted for off-campus housing. She rented a room in a house that was divided into 3 separate rooms, sharing the space with 2 other university students, one of whom was a familiar face from her college days. Tara was employed at a respected law firm in downtown Athens, which enabled her to pay her living expenses and gain valuable work experience in her chosen field. In January 2001, at the age of 23 and in her second year of studies, Tara spent a significant amount of time at the university library. The evening of January 18th followed this pattern. She and a friend went to the library, where they studied for several hours. Around 7:30 p.m., her friend left for home, but Tara chose to stay longer. At about 9:46 p.m., Tara called her friend to check that she had arrived home safely and mentioned her intention to leave the library in a few minutes. The next day, Virginia Baker, Tara's mother, got a phone call. The caller claimed to be a detective and asked if Tara had ever been arrested, explaining they needed her fingerprints. Virginia initially thought it was a prank call and hung up. But then she called the Athens police station to verify. They confirmed the caller was a real detective and told her there had been a fire at Tara's house. Virginia, still confused, asked to speak to Tara. The detective said they couldn't locate her and had found an unidentified body in the house, which is why they needed Tara's fingerprints. At the crime scene, investigators searched for evidence, but the room was badly damaged from the fire and water. It was later discovered that some items that survived the fire were not checked for fingerprints. Tara's laptop was missing from her room, which was unusual since it was a bulky item and other valuables were left untouched. This raised suspicions that the motive might not have been a robbery gone wrong. With no signs of forced entry, investigators suspected that Tara may have known her killer and let them in. The detective provided more information, stating that only one of Tara's roommates had been located so far, and that person was not at home when the fire occurred. However, the other roommate and Tara herself remained unaccounted for, leading investigators to suspect that the unidentified body might be one of them. When Virginia asked the detective to describe the room where the body was discovered, the response left her stunned. The detective explained that the room was packed with antique items, which was consistent with Tara's long-standing hobby of collecting such things. Tara's family rushed to Athens, hoping that the situation was a misunderstanding and that Tara was safe. Upon arrival at the police station, they were left waiting for hours without receiving any updates. Eventually, a detective met with them and delivered devastating news. The body found in the house was Tara's, and she had been murdered, not a victim of the fire. The detective, claiming exhaustion, declined to answer their questions at that time. However, before departing, he revealed that Tara had unknowingly left behind a crucial piece of evidence, fragments of the perpetrator's skin under her fingernails, which could potentially aid in identifying the killer. Tara's relatives were shocked and devastated by the news of her murder. The police refused to provide them with more information, despite their repeated pleas. Desperate for answers, the family made multiple attempts to contact the police, but were continually rebuffed. In fact, the police department never reached out to the family on their own, forcing Tara's relatives to repeatedly call and visit the station to gather scraps of information. Over time, they were able to slowly piece together some details of what had occurred. Tara's family discovered that firefighters may have inadvertently destroyed crucial evidence while extinguishing the blaze, a common occurrence in such situations. The firefighters' primary objective was to put out the fire and potentially rescue survivors, unaware that a murder victim was inside. Furthermore, the investigators failed to secure the crime scene after finding the body, allowing unauthorized access to the area. As Tara's relatives sought information, they faced resistance from the police, who were unwilling to keep them informed about the investigation. The family was also subjected to rudeness and unprofessional behavior from the authorities. In an effort to document their interactions, they began recording conversations with the police and filed complaints against local investigators, but this did not yield any results. The family decided to investigate Tara's death on their own and enlisted the help of a well-known criminologist. However, the local police department would only share case materials with him if he agreed to keep all information and findings confidential, even from Tara's family. For 10 years, the family was unable to obtain Tara's death certificate. They finally received it after writing to the state governor. But the certificate did not provide a detailed cause of death, only stating multiple injuries. Determining the exact time of death was difficult. Medical experts estimated it to be between 10 p.m., when Tara left the library, and 11 a.m., when neighbors called the fire department. However, it is likely that the crime occurred closer to the morning hours, as the fire did not take long to spread. The police investigation found witnesses who reported seeing a middle-aged white man running down the street on the morning of the murder. He was only wearing a t-shirt and jeans, which was unusual given the winter weather. Additionally, the police discovered that a few days before the murder, a man who sounded heavily intoxicated called Tara's university and asked for her phone number. The university had a phone number that students and faculty could call to request student information, such as phone numbers. The intoxicated-sounding man was only able to write down Tara's phone number correctly on his 8th attempt. The investigation into Tara's murder raised several suspicions, but the identity of the man involved remained unknown. At the time of her death, Tara was in a relationship with a boyfriend. Despite his confirmed alibi, the police were hesitant to clear him of suspicion. They continued to scrutinize him, making late-night calls to him and his parents, requesting that he travel to a nearby city for further questioning, DNA sampling, or a polygraph test. Notably, it was Tara's boyfriend who was tasked with identifying her body. He had been living in another city but promptly arrived in Athens upon learning of the fire, even though Tara's parents were already present in town. When the police asked the boyfriend to identify the body, they took him to the house but did not let him enter. A police officer went inside, took a photo of the body, and showed it to the boyfriend on the camera screen. The boyfriend was shocked and said he could not be certain if it was Tara. He mentioned that he had given her earrings, and if he saw them, he would know for sure. The officer went back inside, removed the earrings from the body, and showed them to the boyfriend. Only after seeing the earrings did the boyfriend confirm that the body was Tara's. The police then focused on another man, a student in Tara's classes with a troubling reputation. Several female students came forward and reported that this individual would often ask girls out on dates and not accept no as an answer. He had also asked Tara out multiple times, despite knowing she had a boyfriend. Some girls reported that he exhibited creepy behavior, making them feel uneasy. Despite investigating this person, detectives couldn't find any evidence connecting him to the crime. In a contentious move, they even asked Tara's friends to monitor him, but it yielded no results. Investigators also considered another suspect, an attorney at Tara's workplace. They discovered that just before the murder, he began acting strangely. This attorney had been part of a close-knit group of colleagues who regularly socialized outside of work. But he abruptly stopped participating in their gatherings. Moreover, just days before the incident, he had informed Tara that he would be unable to attend her birthday celebration, which was set to take place the day after the murder. On January 19th, before the fire began, one of Tara's colleagues attempted to persuade him to change his mind and attend the celebration, as Tara valued their friendship and was hurt by his sudden refusal. The colleague visited his office but found him absent, which was unusual given that his workday had already started. He was typically present in the office during morning hours, but not on that particular day. The colleague also checked his schedule, wondering if he had meetings, but it was empty. He failed to show up to work that day, but the following day, he visited another colleague's house and acted strangely. Many people who knew the attorney suspected he regularly used illicit substances, which may have contributed to his erratic behavior. However, another detail raised more suspicion. His colleague noticed several fresh scratches on his neck. It was previously discovered that skin particles from the perpetrator were found under Tara's nails, indicating she likely scratched her attacker. The attorney claimed the scratches on his neck came from a cat and denied any involvement in Tara's murder. His behavior became even more bizarre when asked who he thought committed the crime. He suddenly became agitated, shouting that it was Tara's father, but failed to provide any explanation or evidence to support this accusation. A further unusual circumstance was the sudden resignation of the attorney a few months after the murder, followed by his departure from the state. It remains unclear if the police ever compared his DNA to the samples found under the victim's fingernails or if these samples were even analyzed. As with other aspects of the investigation, the detectives did not disclose any information, not even to Tara's family. Subsequent police findings revealed that the attorney had been discreetly involved with two female colleagues from his workplace, despite the fact that he got married. This discovery could potentially explain his peculiar behavior and unexplained absences from work. Additionally, both women claimed they were certain he was using illegal substances. Police found no evidence linking the lawyer to the murder, clearing him as a suspect. A maintenance company with access to a spare key was also questioned, but yielded no results. The case has seen little progress, with authorities keeping investigation details confidential to avoid impeding progress. Over time, several potential leads emerged in the case. A witness came forward claiming to have seen an African American man outside Tara's house a few hours before the fire. Another person mentioned noticing blood on a notebook belonging to one of Tara's university classmates shortly after the murder. Despite investigating these leads, police were unable to make any progress. Tara's parents offered a $77,000 reward for any information that could help solve the case. However, as the years passed, the team of detectives working on the case changed multiple times, and the new investigators were unable to crack the case. The primary challenge was the lack of evidence, as the fire and the subsequent actions of the firefighters destroyed nearly all potential evidence in Tara's room. In 2019, a podcast covering Tara's 19-year-old murder case was released, bringing together her family, key individuals, and all known information about the crime. This sparked renewed interest and caught the attention of the police department, who began communicating more with Tara's family. As a result, the police re-examined the case, although no new breakthroughs were made. The podcast continued to cover Tara's story for 2 years, ultimately having a substantial impact on the case's progression. The Georgia government introduced a bill to reduce the number of unsolved cases in the state, partly due to Tara's case. The bill was named after Tara and Rhonda Coleman, an 18-year-old woman from Georgia who was murdered in 1990 and whose killer remains unknown. Although the two murders are unrelated, the initiative was called the Coleman-Baker Bill. In 2023, the bill passed unanimously, and the governor signed it in Athens, accompanied by the families of both victims. The law created a special unit within the Georgia Bureau of Investigation to focus on unsolved cases. It also gave victims' families the right to ask police to re-examine these cases and take new steps to solve them. After the law passed in 2023, a unit was formed to investigate Tara's murder. detectives re-reviewed all available information and re-examined the limited evidence using modern DNA analysis. This process took several months until a breakthrough was announced at a press conference on May 13, 2024. After 23 years, police revealed that the perpetrator had been caught. The culprit was identified as 48-year-old Edric Lamont Faust. Investigators did not reveal the exact methods used to identify him, but stated that advanced DNA analysis and biological evidence were crucial in the process. To avoid compromising the ongoing legal case, they withheld specific details, which will be disclosed during the trial. The arrest documents listed multiple charges against Edric, including assault, which may have allowed for a DNA match. Additionally, skin cells found under the victim's nails may have been analyzed using modern tools to extract the killer's DNA. As for Edric, his extensive criminal record, which included numerous arrests for various offenses, should have put him in the FBI database long ago. At the time of Tara's murder, Edric was 25 years old and lived in the same city as the victim. However, the police found no evidence to suggest that Edric knew Tara, leading them to believe he may have broken into her home or tricked her into letting him in. Edric was not a suspect in the case until a few days before his arrest, when new DNA analysis methods brought him to the attention of detectives. He is currently in jail awaiting trial. The evidence the police have against him will be revealed during the trial process. The fact that Edric was denied bail suggests that the detectives have obtained conclusive DNA evidence. The police are certain that Edric is responsible for Tara's murder, and as a result, her case is now officially closed. There is currently no verdict for Edric. He was charged with 1 count of premeditated murder, 4 counts of aggravated murder, 1 count of burglary, 2 counts of aggravated sodomy, 1 count of rape, 1 count of aggravated assault, first-degree arson, and possession of a knife during the commission of a felony. Tara's family finally has closure after 23 years of searching for the truth. They expressed gratitude to the new team of detectives who helped solve her case. In contrast, Rhonda Coleman's case, which the law is also named after, remains unsolved. However, her family may now feel hopeful that new evidence will be uncovered and justice will be served, just like in Tara's case. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Alicia Ross. Alicia Ross was born on February 8, 1980, in the Canadian city of Markham, in the province of Ontario. There's no information about her biological parents. All that's known is that they gave up their rights over the girl, and she was adopted a few months later by a couple named Marvin and Sharon Ross. Her adoptive parents surrounded her with love and care, doing everything they could to ensure their daughter lacked for nothing and could fully develop her talents. When Alicia started going to school, her adoptive parents decided to get divorced, but they maintained a friendly relationship and continued to support together in their daughter's life. Shortly after, Sharon remarried, and her new husband, named Julius Forrest, treated her as if she were his own daughter. Alicia did well in school, excelled at drawing, and also had a passion for photography, enjoying discovering new cities and countries. After finishing school, she spent a year in Australia, where she traveled and enjoyed life before returning home and enrolling in university. In the summer of 2005, Alicia went on a hiking trip in the mountains with her friends. She enjoyed spending time in nature, away from the busy city life. During the trip, she met a 29-year-old man named Sean, and they started a romantic relationship. The age difference of 4 years did not bother the couple. At the time, Alicia still lived in her adoptive parents' home, occupying the basement with a separate entrance, which allowed her to live independently from her parents. On August 16th, Alicia took a walk in the park with her adoptive mother and their dogs. Alicia seemed happy and shared that she was about to be promoted to the position of senior sales manager at work. She was very proud as she had been working hard for a long time, and her efforts were finally paying off. Additionally, Alicia talked to her mother about her boyfriend, Sean, whom she had been dating for just over a month but she seemed deeply in love with. Alicia hoped that this romance could develop into something more significant in the future and expressed a desire to introduce Sean to her adoptive parents by arranging a family dinner. After a stroll through the park, Sharon headed home, and Alicia went out on a date with her sweetheart, promising not to stay out too late because she had to get up early for work the next day. They said their goodbyes and went their separate ways. After meeting with Sean, Alicia invited him to her house. They had a good time together, and around midnight, he went home. Alicia accompanied him to the door, which served as a second exit from the backyard. They said goodbye with a kiss, and then he left, promising to call her as soon as he got home. Around midnight, as promised, Sean called his girlfriend, but she didn't answer the phone. He wasn't too worried, thinking that Alicia had simply fallen asleep since she had to get up early for work. However, the next morning, when he tried to call her again and she still didn't answer, he genuinely became concerned and contacted a mutual acquaintance who worked in the same office as Alicia. From her, he learned that Alicia had not gone to work, and he immediately rushed to her house. On the morning of August 17th, Sharon and Julius left their home around 10 a.m. to play golf with friends. They noticed their daughter's car in the driveway but assumed a colleague had picked her up, so they didn't think much of it and continued with their plans. About half an hour later, Sean arrived at the Ross residence and, finding no sign of Alicia there, he called the police to report her as a missing person. Sean also immediately contacted Sharon to inform her of the situation. Sharon and Julius rushed home immediately after hearing the news. By the time they arrived, the police were already present at the scene. Sean was the first person to notice the girl's disappearance and inform the authorities. Sean was also the last person to see Alicia alive and well the evening before she vanished. According to Sean, they had said goodbye at the gate where his car was parked around midnight, and she had not been in touch since then. When Sharon and Julius reached the house, law enforcement was already there, investigating the area and speaking with Sean, who had called them. Sean appeared visibly nervous and distraught. When the mother checked Alicia's room, she noticed that all of her daughter's personal belongings were still in their place. Her purse, passport, driver's license, keys, cell phone, bank cards, and cash were all left behind. The gate was open but not forced, suggesting that she either let her abductor in or willingly left the yard with someone. In the backyard, the police found some signs of disturbance. The lawn and flowers in one spot were trampled, as if someone had fallen there. Additionally, a pair of cigarettes and Alicia's right sandal, which she had been wearing the evening before, were found on the ground in a straight line. Neither Alicia nor her parents smoked, and Sean claimed he never smoked that particular brand. Sean was considered the prime suspect almost immediately. At first, he was clearly very nervous and his narration seemed a bit confusing and disjointed. Second, he was the first to report his girlfriend's disappearance to the police, even before speaking with her parents and confirming that they hadn't seen her either. Therefore, he definitely knew she was missing. Moreover, the authorities found biological traces of Sean and her on her bed. Based on this, the investigation speculated that Alicia may have rejected Sean's advances, and he decided to force himself on her, then trying to cover his tracks, and staging her disappearance, which likely resulted in her losing her life. Sean was brought to the police station and questioned. The investigator presented their theory to him, which left the young man stunned. He was dismayed to be the prime suspect and swore he would never harm his girlfriend, as he loved her. Sean admitted they had intimate moments that evening, but insisted it was consensual. Her parents had nothing bad to say about Sean. He hadn't argued with their daughter, hadn't mistreated her, and she spoke only well of him. Their relationship was progressing rapidly and quite happily, and Alicia even hoped to have a future with him. It's understandable that the parents are deeply concerned about their daughter's disappearance. The facts known so far suggest that she had no plans or reasons to leave her apartment. She was looking forward to a promotion at her workplace, and as a responsible person, it's unlikely she would have just abandoned everything. Even if there had been unforeseen circumstances, she would have surely informed her parents and taken her documents, money, and phone with her. The police couldn't find sufficient evidence to arrest Sean, so he was released after questioning. However, the investigators haven't completely ruled out Sean as a suspect and are continuing to monitor him. Sean himself seemed depressed and very disturbed. An intensive search for Alicia began the day after she went missing. Initially, a thorough inspection of the house and yard was conducted. Investigators examined the surrounding area in detail and interviewed neighbors. However, no one reported having heard or seen anything suspicious that night. The authorities theorized that the woman disappeared sometime between midnight, when she said goodbye to Sean, and dawn, a time when the streets are usually quiet and deserted, making it difficult to find witnesses. Flyers with Alicia's photos were distributed throughout the city, listing the phone numbers where people could provide any information about her whereabouts. The search for Alicia became one of the most extensive operations in the history of Ontario. Every rugged terrain, ravine, and swampy area were examined, but no clues, leads, or even suggestions about the whereabouts of the missing woman were found. Her parents also appealed to the public through the media, expressing their belief that their daughter was still alive but was being held against her will somewhere. They implored whoever had their daughter to let her return home unharmed and not to do her any harm. The police leaned towards the theory that someone Alicia knew personally had kidnapped her and possibly ended her life. This hypothesis was supported by the lack of signs of struggle, the absence of evidence of entry, and the fact that the door had been left open, but no concrete clues were found. The cigarette found on the floor had only a very smudged fingerprint that could not be identified. Investigators thoroughly reviewed Alicia's contacts and analyzed all calls and messages from her phone and email, but nothing suspicious was uncovered. On the 6th day of the search, the case was officially classified as a criminal offense, even though there was a lack of evidence, and Sean remained the main suspect. Sean lived alone in his own house about 10 miles from Alicia's house. After realizing that public suspicion had increased following his media appearance, he no longer participated in the search and refused to speak to the press. The investigators questioned Sean 3 more times, but his story remained consistent. He was then offered a lie detector test, which he refused, further convincing the police that he was involved in the crime. 2 weeks after the disappearance, Sean was arrested on an unrelated charge. He was pulled over late at night for driving under the influence and resisting arrest. Speculation arose that he was drowning his guilt in alcohol. After Sean's arrest, Alicia's parents gave another interview, sharing that they had not met him personally and only knew of him through their daughter's stories. They believed she was happy, but now Sharon considered the possibility that she may have withheld certain details to avoid upsetting them, despite having planned to introduce her boyfriend to her family soon. The police interviewed Sean's neighbors to determine if they had noticed anything unusual recently, such as him disposing of large trash bags, behaving suspiciously, leaving unexpectedly, or washing his car. However, these investigations did not yield any significant information. The detectives were left hoping that Sean would eventually confess everything. About a month after Alicia's disappearance, there was an unexpected development in the case. The initial media attention surrounding her case began to wane, and the search efforts continued but were no longer prominently featured in news reports. The investigation appeared to have reached a dead end. Then, on September 20th, 2005, more than a month after Alicia went missing, a completely unexpected twist occurred. A 31-year-old local resident named Daniel contacted the police and confessed to ending Alicia's life, providing the location where he had hidden her body. It's important to note that this man was never under suspicion, and the police had not considered him at all during their investigation. Initially, it seemed that the man simply craved fame and attention, and therefore decided to take responsibility for the most notorious case in recent years. However, all doubts were dispelled when the police found her body in the location he had indicated. Before delving into who this new person of interest was, let's examine why the police had not shown any interest in him previously. Daniel was an unemployed inmate who lived in his mother's house, which was adjacent to the Alicia family's home. Their house were separated by unkempt shrubs, forming an almost impenetrable barrier. Although the criminal and the victim had lived practically their entire lives right next to each other, they had never interacted before. Alicia had observed Daniel behaving in an unusual manner on his house, leading her to believe he might be mentally unwell. Daniel had experienced significant socialization issues from a young age. He lacked friends, was mocked at school, and all his attempts to form relationships were unsuccessful, causing him to develop a deep resentment towards women. As a child, girls had rejected him, calling him a loser and refusing to associate with him. At the age of 8, Daniel was diagnosed with a socializing behavioral disorder and had been receiving ongoing psychological treatment. Although therapy did not significantly improve his condition, during his teenage years, he confessed to having fantasies of suddenly attacking and overpowering a girl, which excited him. However, specialists remained confident that these fantasies would remain within his imagination. After finishing school, Daniel stopped attending therapy sessions and decided not to continue his education. He became a recluse, living in his mother's house and isolating himself from the outside world. Daniel spent most of his days in his room, often visiting adult websites. Occasionally, he would venture out in the evenings to secretly observe his neighbors, peeping into their windows. He seemed particularly interested in watching when someone was engaged in intimate activities, which excited him. Daniel initially claimed that Alicia's death was accidental and he hid the body to avoid punishment. He said that when he realized she showed no signs of life, he placed her body in the trunk of his mother's car and drove about 50 miles out of town, hiding it in a bushy ravine by the side of a country road. 3 weeks later, fearing the body would be discovered, he moved it in the middle of the night to a deserted area. The body was found in the place Daniel indicated, confirming Daniel's guilt. The condition of the remains suggested the girl had been treated with extreme cruelty. Alicia seemed to have been hit by a vehicle. The forensic examination revealed that she had almost all of her ribs broken, her neck and both arms fractured, and extensive closed head trauma with internal bleeding. The exact cause of death could not be determined. The forensic experts were surprised, as they had never seen anything like it before. It was necessary to clarify all the circumstances and the timeline of events that fateful night to precisely determine how Alicia suffered such injuries. Initially, the convicted man claimed he had had an argument with his neighbor on a path covered in bushes between their houses. At some point during the verbal altercation, she called him a loser, which angered him, and he struck her in the head. When she fell, he kicked her several times in the chest. When he realized she wasn't breathing, he decided to hide the body and then moved it again when the search area expanded. However, there was something in his story that didn't add up. There were missing details and specifics. For example, it wasn't clear what Daniel was doing at his neighbor's house at night, why they started arguing, what caused such a brutal beating, and why the evidence found at the scene was arranged in a straight line. Restoring the full picture of events was challenging, but law enforcement managed to do so. That evening, Daniel went to spy on his neighbors. He noticed that Alicia's boyfriend had come over, so he approached their house closely. As the couple was being intimate, he watched them from a window. Then he moved back to the bushes but did not leave. Closer to midnight, the lovers went outside and kissed by the gate, just a couple of feet away from the lurking neighbor. When Sean left, the girl returned to the yard and noticed Daniel. She became very angry, realizing that he had been spying on her and her boyfriend all this time. She started yelling at him, calling him a pervert, and demanded that he leave immediately. Finally, Alicia called him a loser, after which she turned around and was about to go back into the house. This is a very disturbing and violent incident. The victim was subjected to a brutal physical assault, with the perpetrator striking her numerous times in the head, neck, chest, and back, causing extensive injuries and internal bleeding. After realizing the victim had died, the perpetrator moved the body to his garage, stripped her naked, and masturbated. He then placed the corpse in the trunk of his mother's car and transported it to a remote location outside the city. This sequence of events indicates a severe lack of empathy and disregard for human life. The language used is graphic and unsettling, but necessary to convey the gravity of the situation. Upon returning to his home, the criminal took a shower, changed his clothes, and behaved as if nothing had happened. His clothes, as well as the personal belongings of the victim and the towels he used to clean the crime scene, were bagged and disposed of. The trial and sentencing only began in April 2007, when new details were made public. The accused confessed to having taken the life of his neighbor, but he and his lawyer insisted that it was an involuntary act. Additionally, the defense requested a psychiatric evaluation, indicating that Daniel was ill and should not be considered responsible for his actions, suggesting that he should be treated in a clinic rather than incarcerated. However, the prosecution argued that, despite his mental illness and issues with anger management, Daniel acted with full awareness of the consequences of his actions. He ruthlessly kicked Alicia with all his might, knowing that this would likely result in her death. Nevertheless, the court-ordered psychiatric evaluation confirmed that the accused could be fully responsible for his actions. Regarding the items found in the backyard, Daniel never admitted to having placed them in a straight line. On May 7, 2007, Daniel Sylvester was convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 16 years. A year later, Canadian singer-songwriter Kathleen Edwards wrote a song titled Alicia Ross, which portrayed the events from the perspective of Alicia during the final moments of her life. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Heather Rich. We all experience youthful adventures, a rebellious spirit, and the transition into adulthood. However, for some, adolescence can become perilous. In the remote southern region of Oklahoma, USA, lies a quiet town named Waurika. This small community has around 2,000 residents, where everyone knows one another, and life is calm and steady. In the fall of 1996, the Rich family lived in Oklahoma. Mom Gail, Dad Dwayne Rich, and their 4 children, 3 boys, and a girl named Heather. At the time, Heather was a sophomore in high school. She was an excellent student and cheerleader, known for her beauty and ability to attract attention. Heather was kind, but had a rebellious streak in her teenage years. On the evening of October 2, 1996, an argument broke out between Gail and Heather. They discussed a phone bill that cost the family $300, which upset Gail's mother, who disapproved of Heather's spending habits. Dwayne, the father, on the other hand, remained calm about the situation. Gail explained to Heather that due to the family's difficult financial situation, she could not afford to pay the large monthly bills. Dwayne, an electrician, had suffered severe burns from a transformer explosion and required extensive medical care and skin grafts. He was unable to work and support the family, forcing Gail to take on additional work to make ends meet. Every dollar was important, especially since Dwayne was about to undergo expensive surgery. Gail wanted Heather to learn the value of money and the importance of being self-sufficient, but Heather struggled with this, leading to a serious argument between them. After things calmed down, Heather went to bed. She stopped by the living room to say goodnight to her father, but walked past her mother in silence to express her resentment. The next morning, October 3, Gail woke everyone up for breakfast, as was their usual routine. However, Heather did not come down for breakfast. Gail believed that it was because Heather was angry due to the events of the previous night. Gail hoped that when Heather was hungry, she would come down to eat. But after a while, Heather still did not appear. Gail went up to check on her in her room. Gail was surprised to find the room empty. At that time, cell phones were not common, and Heather did not have a phone. Worried, her parents called one of Heather's friends, but no one knew where she was. This behavior was unusual for Heather. She had never run away before and didn't have any mental health issues. She always took care of her appearance and wouldn't leave the house for long without changing clothes or doing her makeup. With all her belongings still at home, worried Gail and Dwayne immediately went to the sheriff's department in Wow to report their daughter missing. Gail explains their argument from the previous day, when Gail expressed her frustration over the large phone bill, which was a significant burden on the family, and Heather appeared stubborn and determined not to admit her mistake. The sheriff tried to reassure the parents by comparing the situation to a typical teenage runaway, especially after an argument with her mother. However, this behavior was unusual for Heather, who usually tried to find a compromise even after a disagreement. The sheriff explained that most runaways returned home after a period of time. They suggested to the parents that Heather might have returned while they were at the sheriff's office. The police told Gail and Dwayne that Heather would need to be missing for at least a day before they could officially declare her missing. Since that time had not passed, the police could not accept their report. Frustrated and worried, Gail and Dwayne believed that something was wrong and that their daughter was in danger. They began searching all over town, starting with Heather's closest friends. One of these friends was Randy Wood, a 17-year-old boy who was the captain of the school's football team. He had dated Heather, but they had quickly broken up and agreed to remain friends. Importantly, he was one of the boys responsible for Heather's large phone bill. When asked about Heather's whereabouts, Randy said that he did not know where Heather was or what had happened to her. Gail then decided to contact another friend of Heather's, a 17-year-old high school student named Joshua Luke Bagwell, whom Heather had just started dating. When Gail called, Joshua's grandmother answered and said that he was resting after a party. She wanted to let him sleep and refused to wake him up to take the call. Joshua's grandmother said she was cleaning out the trailer in their yard where the school children had played the night before. When the mother asked about her daughter's disappearance, she said she didn't know. Relatives then searched the area for any sign of Heather. After a day of unsuccessful searching, her parents returned to the police station, and eventually the police joined the search effort. By October 10, a week after the search began, no useful information about Heather had been found. Given the amount of time that had passed, few people still held out hope of finding her alive. When searchers reached the area near the Texas border, a body was found floating face down, partially submerged in muddy water. Observers from a bridge noticed that the body was covered in mud, making it difficult to see in the murky water, as if someone had deliberately obscured it. When a diver finally recovered the body and brought it to shore, it was observed that the body had been severely mutilated, with multiple gunshot wounds. A forensic examination was conducted. Experts later determined that the victim had been shot 9 times at close range. The condition of the body was horrific, with many serious cuts. During this time, there was only one missing person in the area, so Heather's parents were asked to identify the body. They only recognized their daughter through the ring on her finger, an engraved piece of jewelry that her mother had given her. Later, dental records confirmed that it was indeed Heather's body. The news of her death quickly became the talk of the town the next day. Within hours, the entire village knew about the case. Randy Wood also heard the shocking news that same day. It just so happened that Randy had been crowned king of several football seasons that day. It was expected that there would be a big celebration after the game. However, Randy was deeply affected by what had happened to his ex-girlfriend Heather. He then went to the bridge and stared at the spot where Heather's body was found for a long time. In fact, he knew more about the situation than he had shared with Heather's parents. The investigation quickly led the police to Randy and some of his friends. One of them is the son of wealthy parents. The second is the best football player in school and captain of the team. The third is an ambitious criminal from the streets. As soon as the police got involved in the case, they spoke to Heather's parents. By that time, Gail had contacted several of Heather's friends and acquaintances. Gail became suspicious of two young men: Heather's ex-boyfriend, 17-year-old Randy Wood, and her current boyfriend, Joshua Luke Bagwell, who slept after a party and did not answer Gail's phone calls. She believed they were hiding something. These high school students appeared to be reciting rehearsed answers, and when pressed with further questions, they struggled to answer. Their behavior was quite tense. Gail believes that Randy and Joshua have more information than they are admitting. While talking to Heather's classmates and friends, the police have gathered many clues that Joshua and Randy know important details, and they should assist the police in uncovering what happened on that tragic night when Heather left home after an argument with her mother. Heather's best friend told her that Heather was planning to attend a party that night to meet her boyfriend, Joshua. Even though her parents had forbidden her from leaving the house after dark, she decided to sneak out. After her parents fell asleep, she climbed out of the window around 11 p.m. At the party, she was supposed to meet Joshua and Randy. Joshua came from a wealthy family and always arrived in fancy cars and dressed better than his peers. Randy comes from a humble family, but his athletic talents make him as popular as his wealthy friend Joshua. Randy is an attractive young man who is admired for his ability to play football at a professional level. Randy has earned the position of captain of the team through his skills and is recognized as the best player in town. Randy and Joshua are close friends. They often spend weekends driving Joshua's car along country roads. They often hang out with girls and drink frequently and smoke occasionally. There were few places for teenagers to hang out in the city, so they found their own ways to have fun. Heather, along with a friend, experimented with drinking and hanging out with popular boys. The night before she disappeared, she left home to spend time with them. On September 27, 1996, just 5 days before Heather went missing, Heather and another cheerleader were found in the hallway of the stadium with marijuana and smoking paraphernalia. It was also revealed that Heather had been drinking alcohol. As a result, she was suspended from school for 3 days, and her parents learned about this from her teacher. They were upset, as they never expected their 16-year-old daughter to engage in such dangerous behavior. Heather explained that curiosity led her to try these substances. She promised her parents that she would stop. Her parents became increasingly concerned about why she had chosen this path, as she was an excellent student and athlete. Although her parents believed her promise to quit, they found it difficult to confirm whether she was telling the truth. Bad habits may have played a direct role in her death. Police focused on Joshua and Randy to uncover the events at the party before Heather disappeared. Randy said he and Joshua had been in a trailer behind Joshua's house, where they spent the evening playing and drinking. However, both insisted they had not seen Heather that night, which raised the police's suspicions. The two young men told their stories in identical, almost rehearsed ways, they showing little emotion. This behavior led police to suspect that the teens were not telling the truth. At this stage, the police lacked evidence linking Joshua and Randy to the crime. However, their unusual behavior raised suspicions of their involvement. As a result, both young men became prime suspects, prompting a closer look at their backgrounds, their connection to Heather, and the events of that night's party. The autopsy revealed new insights, particularly regarding the number of shots fired at Heather. Remarkably, even police handguns typically only held 8 rounds. This begs the question, why reload the gun to fire another shot when the person was clearly dead? The second notable detail was the type of ammunition used to kill Heather. The killer chose Winchester double-shot. These bullets were quite rare and could only be purchased from one store in the city. Police checked the store's receipts and discovered that just before the murder, only one person had purchased this type of ammunition. The seller identified the buyer as Joshua in photos provided by the police. He came into the store and bought a whole box of 20 bullets. The seller also mentioned that Joshua was with another person. This person was not Randy, but Joshua's close friend, Curtis Allen Gamble, who was known to the police. He had a history of legal trouble, including multiple arrests. Despite his young age, Curtis had spent much of his life in juvenile facilities. He had a troubled past, having been arrested for drunk driving and shooting at animals, and even passers-by. Curtis quickly became the prime suspect, as Joshua and Randy had no previous legal problems and were never considered aggressive or dangerous. On October 23, police went to Curtis's home in another city. Notably, just a short distance from his home was a bridge over the river where Heather's body was discovered. After police arrived and found Curtis was not home, they spoke with his grandmother. She shared information about her grandson and noted that Curtis was very familiar with the area of the neighboring city and frequently visited the bridge where Heather was found. She mentioned that she used to take him fishing at that location when he was a child. The next day, Curtis was arrested and taken to the Orica Sheriff's Office. The interrogation lasted over 8 hours, during which Curtis remained mostly silent but agreed to take a lie detector test. However, the most important information the police learned was that Curtis admitted to owning a Mossberg handgun. This type of handgun can use a special type of bullet. Police suspected that he may have owned the weapon used in the murder. Investigations revealed that Heather had been shot with this rare type of handgun. After they seized the weapon and conducted gun tests, experts confirmed that it was indeed the weapon used to kill Heather. When the police presented evidence linking Curtis to Heather's murder, the investigation took a significant break. Curtis broke down and told the police that his two friends, Randy and Joshua, were involved in the murder. Curtis then wrote a one-page confession. The police were able to identify the killers. Randy and Joshua were then arrested and taken to the sheriff's department. There, the police presented Curtis's confession, in which Curtis was the one who wanted to kill Heather and that he initiated the attack. However, he was not the one who actually carried out the murder. According to Curtis, he gave Joshua his weapon and forced Joshua to shoot Heather. However, the police were skeptical of Curtis's confession, as Joshua did not fit the profile of a criminal. Joshua had no previous problems with the law, was known to be a model student, an excellent athlete, and was generally well-liked. The party took place in southern Oklahoma, while the murder took place in Texas. As a result, they had to appear in court in Texas, where the crime could result in the death penalty. After being pressured by the police, Randy finally spoke during a second interview. However, he denied any involvement in the murder, saying that Curtis committed the crime and that Joshua assisted him. Joshua, meanwhile, chose not to cooperate with the investigation. In October 1996, the police received two conflicting confessions. They decided to believe Randy's story, especially since he had passed a lie detector test. According to Randy, he had planned to go out drinking with his friends Curtis and Joshua that night. Randy later learned that Heather was supposed to be joining them. Heather knew Joshua and Randy, but had never met Curtis, so she had no idea he could be dangerous. That night, everyone drank a lot of alcohol, and Heather gradually lost consciousness. In her drunken state, Curtis harassed her and tried to attack her. Although she could barely speak, Curtis was afraid that when she woke up, she would remember what had happened. Knowing that rape was a serious crime that could result in a prison sentence, Curtis suggested that Heather be eliminated to avoid consequences. Randy thought he was joking, but he was serious. Curtis took a handgun from his car and aimed it at everyone present. Joshua and Randy understood the danger they were in, so they chose not to resist. They put the intoxicated Heather in the trunk of Joshua's car and drove towards Curtis's house. Before they arrived, Curtis led them across a bridge where Heather's body was later discovered. Curtis ordered the car to stop in the middle of the bridge and told them to pull Heather out of the trunk and place her near the railing. Fearing for their own safety, Joshua and Randy complied, but Heather was too intoxicated to stand. They left her on the ground. Curtis approached Heather and began shooting at close range. Randy saw a large hole appear in Heather's skull and instinctively covered his eyes, not wanting to see any more. Curtis unloaded all his bullets on her. Curtis and Joshua then dumped her off the bridge and drove away. Randy said they were horrified by what they had just witnessed and the extent of the cruelty Curtis had inflicted on Heather. They decided to remain silent out of fear for their own lives. In October 1996, Randy Wood, Joshua Luke Bagwell, and Curtis Allen Gamble were charged with the kidnapping and murder of 16-year-old Heather. Of the three, Joshua was the most difficult to deal with because he would not confess, remained silent, and there was virtually no evidence against him. The prosecutor had to rely on the testimony of Randy and Curtis, but their testimony was inconsistent. To resolve this problem, the prosecutor offered Randy a deal. He had to testify against Joshua in exchange for life imprisonment with the possibility of parole in 30 years. Randy quickly accepted the offer. On October 15, Curtis agreed to a plea deal that could have resulted in life imprisonment without parole. However, while in prison awaiting trial, Curtis assaulted a security guard, knocking him down and attempting to choke him before other guards intervened. Nearly a year and a half after Heather's death. In February 1998, Joshua's trial began. The defense made numerous attempts to justify the actions of those involved in the crime. The attorneys sought to discredit Heather by portraying her as an alcoholic and a womanizer, claiming that she had an inappropriate relationship with Curtis and that she had begun to threaten others. They argued that this behavior motivated Curtis to choose to eliminate her. Heather's parents defended their daughter, insisting that Heather was a talented athlete and a good person. She accidentally went with a bad group of friends and met a criminal. The floor was unexpectedly given to Curtis, he reiterating his claim that Joshua had nothing to do with the crime and had no knowledge of the planned murder. He claimed that Randy was the one who shot Heather. In a surprising turn of events, Randy refused to take the plea deal. He did not want his confession to be seen as an attempt to save himself and put others at risk. In court, he stated that he wanted to seek justice for Heather, despite his attorney advising him not to. Although this noble choice put him at risk of the death penalty, it left a strong impression on Heather's parents, who later met with Randy in person to discuss the situation. On February 14, Randy took the stand before the jury, sharing his account of the tragic events of that night, and the jury believed him completely. Randy described how Joshua had participated in Heather's murder along with Curtis, and also detailed Curtis's role in covering up the crime. That day, Curtis was convicted of conspiracy to commit murder and first-degree murder, resulting in a sentence of life in prison plus 99 years. On May 8, Heather's and Randy's parents met during a live broadcast. Despite their deep sorrow over their loss, they were struck by the honesty of Randy and the genuine remorse he showed. On August 7, 1998, Randy Wood's trial ended, and he was found guilty of murdering the Heather, receiving a life sentence with the chance of parole after 40 years. Many people were upset by this verdict, as Randy was the only one who demonstrated remorse and risked his own safety to tell the truth. Many felt that he did not deserve such a severe punishment. Joshua was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He was placed in the same correctional facility as Curtis. In January 2002, both men made a bold escape at night and evaded capture for 10 days while hiding in Texas, prompting a national alert. Eventually, they were caught and returned to prison. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Dina Thompson. In the summer of 2022, the British media reported the release of one of the country's most dangerous criminals, 61-year-old Dina Thompson, known as the Black Widow. Today, I'll explain how she became infamous across the UK and why some people still fear her. Dina was born in 1960 in Hendon, a suburb of London. Her family was not poor, but barely made ends meet. Dina's father, a prison guard, was passionate about sports. He encouraged Dina to join a sports club, where she practiced gymnastics. He often participated in competitions and traveled abroad, often taking Dina with him. Dina grew up to be a cheerful and sociable girl, which made it easy for her to meet and connect with boys. After graduating from university, Dina found a job. In 1982, at the age of 22, she met a young man named Lee Wyatt on a date arranged by Lee's cousin. They felt a strong connection from the first meeting. 2 years later, in 1984, they married. After the wedding, they moved to Yapton, a small village in West Sussex, England, with a population of only 3,000. In Yapton, the Dana family welcomed a son, and Dina began working as a treasurer at a construction company. Meanwhile, Lee started a business selling designer stuffed toys, which they designed together. Their neighbors considered them a typical family. The neighbors did not have a close relationship with the Dina family. However, the attractive Dina often attracted the attention of local men. In 1991, the 31-year-old Dina met a local journalist named Julian Webb. He wrote articles about products sold in shops across West Sussex. Julian, 28, asked Dina to model clothes and display household items for money. She accepted his offer, and soon her picture appeared in the local newspapers. A month after Dina and Julian met, neighbors spotted them kissing near Julian's house. A few months later, Julian took Dina to his mother and expressed his desire to marry her. Julian's mother was surprised at how quickly things had progressed. She noted that Julian had met Dina in May, and by August, they were planning their wedding. Soon the whole village of Yapton knew about it. It was also known that Dina was still legally married to her first husband, Lee Wyatt. However, Lee had been missing for a long time at the time, and no one knew where he was. On the north coast of Cornwall, in the small resort town of Newquay, a young man named Colin Mitchell arrived and began looking for work at various entertainment venues. He was hired as a junior manager at an arcade. Colin provided his papers and explained that he had left West Sussex due to some problems. Initially, he appeared friendly and cheerful to everyone. However, it was soon realized that he was slightly deaf, which sometimes made communication difficult. As a result, the arcade staff often had to approach him and gently tap him on the shoulder to get his attention. It was soon realized that Colin Mitchell was his alias. His real name was Lee Wyatt. He explained that he had escaped trouble in West Sussex. Living with Dina in the village of Yapton, his wife was involved in toy manufacturing. Their most popular product was a leprechaun called Sean, who sold well both locally and outside the county. In the summer of 1991, Dina informed Lee that the Disney Corporation was interested in Sean the leprechaun and was willing to pay $50 million for the rights to the character. Dina then informed Lee that the mafia had found out about their arrangement and was threatening to kill the entire family unless they handed over most of their money. Dina convinced him that he needed to flee immediately to protect his family. Lee obtained documents under the name Colin Mitchell and traveled to Cornwall County. The decision to flee may have saved his life. However, the real threat was not from the mafia, as there had never been any deal with Disney. Dina made up the story and convinced her husband that it was true. While on the run, he lived in an unfamiliar city under a false identity as a homeless person. He worked and sent most of his earnings to his son, continuing to support the family. On November 2, 1991, Dina used her money to marry her second husband, journalist Julian Webb. Lee was away and unaware of the situation, Julian was overjoyed to marry Dina, believing she was now his. However, a few months after the wedding, Dina informed Julian that she was terminally ill and that her company was pressuring her to resign. $26,000 had gone missing from the accounts of the companies where Dina worked as treasurer, prompting the police to focus their investigation on her. Dina claimed that her first husband, Lee Wyatt, was responsible for the theft. She alleged that he had stolen the money and gone into hiding, but that he had now returned to their village of Yapton and threatened her. Dina produced threatening letters from Lee and shared recordings of phone calls in which he spoke of seeking revenge. She also alleged that he had come to her home and assaulted her. However, there was no evidence to support this claim. Notably, a few months after Dina married Julian, Lee returned to Yapton when he learned of Dina's marriage. Lee created scandals involving Dina. The police believed Dina's accusations and began pursuing Lee, who went into hiding. The lies complicated Dina's life and the lives of the men involved with her. Julian had given Dina $25,000 from his savings to treat a terminal illness that she claimed was the reason she had lost her job. However, as the money began to run out, Julian began asking Dina about her progress. To his surprise, Dina had no medical documents to prove that she was actually ill or receiving treatment. On 30 June 1994, Julian celebrated his 300th birthday at home with his wife, Dana. In the evening, Julian's mother called, but Dina answered the phone and said that Julian was feeling unwell and unable to talk. The mother suggested that Dina call a doctor, but Dina did not follow this advice. That night, Julian died. Forensic experts concluded that he had died from a drug overdose, but they were unable to determine whether his death was a result of criminal activity. Dina insisted that Julian had chosen to end his life. When police questioned the neighbors, they learned that there had been unusual activity involving the couple 2 to 4 days before the tragedy. Dina and Julian had been arguing loudly about money, which surprised their neighbors, as they were not used to hearing arguments in Dina's household. Julian was generally considered a positive and cheerful person. The day after Julian's tragic death, Dina went to his workplace to ask about receiving $35,000 from his insurance policy. However, it is reported that she never received the money. In addition, their marriage was considered invalid because Dina was still the legal wife of her first husband, Lee Wyatt. Dina insisted on having Julian's body cremated, but his mother strongly opposed the decision. At Julian's funeral, Dina wore a black leather miniskirt and a revealing black blouse, showing no sign of grief. After Julian's death, she turned her home into a meeting place for men. Although many men visited her, none stayed for more than a day. In 1997, Dina officially divorced her first husband, Lee Wyatt, and won her freedom. The following year, she met Richard Thompson. Shortly after meeting him, Dina confided that she was battling breast cancer. Richard, who supported her, gave her all of his savings and promised to make the rest of her life enjoyable. They traveled from England to Florida, where Richard had a lavish wedding ceremony at a luxury hotel with staff as witnesses. After the wedding, they moved to Brighton, East Sussex, on the south coast of England. Richard had always wanted to buy a boat and pursue a career in fishing. Dina encouraged him to take courses to start a yacht charter business for amateur fishermen, while Richard would take on the role of captain, helping beginners learn how to fish. 8 months after the wedding, Dina told her husband that she wanted to give him a special gift. On January 1, 2000, they decided to take a shower together. Dina then asked if she could tie Richard up, and he agreed. She tied him up, gagged him, and covered his face with a towel. Richard then waited, confused, for what he thought was a prank. Suddenly, Dina hit him with a baseball bat, followed by another blow. Fortunately, Richard freed his hands and lunged at her. At that point, Dina grabbed a knife and stabbed him in the shoulder. Only then was Richard able to grab Dina and subdue her. Richard reported the incident to the police. Dina accused her husband of assaulting her, claiming that she acted in self-defense. The next day, a real estate staff came to Richard's house, expecting to meet Dina to sell real estate. Richard was surprised when he opened the door. When he saw the agent, Richard realized what was going on. He suspected Dina had planned to kill him, sell the house, and disappear, knowing that since he was going to America, no one would look for him during the trial. Dina drained Richard's bank account by forging his signature. She also accumulated a large debt on his credit cards. In addition, they reported other victims, former lovers of Dana, including businessmen, teachers, prison guards, and even a convicted felon. All of these men claimed that Dana manipulated them, demanding money and pretending to be seriously ill. Dana asked for money from many men. While some gave her money willingly, others had their accounts secretly drained by Dana. The truth about her first husband, Lee, was revealed. In 1991, Dana stole money from her workplace, where she worked as a cashier. At the time, she produced threatening letters allegedly written by Lee and played recordings of phone calls in which he spoke of possible revenge. However, in 2000, it was revealed that the letters and recordings were made while Lee was preparing to escape from a mafia organization. Dina had convinced him to do so in order to make people think he had disappeared and abandoned her. Lee believed this would protect him and their son from threats from the mafia. In 2000, a jury acquitted Dina Thompson in a case involving an alleged assault on her third husband, Richard Thompson. The judge described Richard as a paranoid attention seeker. Although Dina was cleared of the felony charge, she was convicted of 15 other counts of financial fraud. She was sentenced to 3 years and 9 months in prison. A strange incident involving her husband, coupled with complaints about her from multiple lovers, led to an investigation into Dina and the death of her second husband, Julian Webb. Dina gave conflicting accounts of what happened to Julian. She told her mother that he had sunstroke after drinking too much on his birthday and fell asleep in the sun. However, Julian's mother did not believe this story, knowing that he had always been healthy and rarely drank. She often urged Julian to leave Dina. Dina claimed to investigators that Julian had taken his own life, but those who knew him found this hard to believe, as he was usually cheerful and rarely had conflicts with anyone. To a former co-worker, Dina mentioned that Julian died from a steroid overdose to maintain his healthy physique, but this was also false. A friend of Dina's revealed that she had hinted at poisoning her second husband, Julian, by secretly adding the drug to Julian's favorite spicy food. The police tracked down the owner of a small restaurant where Julian frequently ordered. They recalled that on the day Julian died, Dina had gone to the restaurant and ordered rice with curry in a takeout box. Police speculated that the strong flavor of the curry may have effectively masked the bitter taste of the medication. In October 2001, 7 years after Julian's death, the investigation into his death continued. Julian's body was exhumed and sent for a re-examination. New tests, unlike the original ones, found higher levels of the drug in his system. It was discovered that he had been poisoned with a large dose of antidepressants, which Dina had mixed into Julian's favorite dish, curry rice. In addition, she had added a large dose of aspirin to the drink he had with his meal. On his birthday, when Julian's mother called to congratulate him, he was lying in bed, almost unconscious. At that point, there was still a chance to save him. The trial of 43-year-old Dina Thompson took place in 2003. A senior police officer said she was the most dangerous woman he had ever met. The judge also noted that Dina was one of the best prolific liars he had ever seen. In 2003, Dina Thompson was convicted of murdering her second husband, Julian Webb. She was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 16 years. Dina's crimes were reported on numerous television shows, crime magazines, and newspapers, earning her the nickname the Black Widow. In 2010, Police began investigating the disappearance of Stoyan Kostov, one of Dana's first lovers from Bulgaria. Dina and Stoyan were in a relationship from the late 1970s to the early 1980s. During her childhood, Dina and her father traveled to competitions in various countries, including Bulgaria. During one of these trips, Dina met a young man and they quickly became close friends. Stoyan's family mentioned a number of strange incidents involving him and Dina. After their brief relationship, the young man mysteriously disappeared and was never found, dead or alive. It is suspected that Stoyan may have been one of Dina's first victims. While in prison, Dana attended rehabilitation courses and worked with a psychologist. In 2021, the police investigating her case expressed concern about her chances of being released, stating that she would commit another crime. Dana would not be able to stop, as she showed no remorse. However, during her time in prison, she was considered a model prisoner and always spoke positively. Dina Thompson, 61, was released from prison in the summer of 2022. Upon her release, she must notify the police of any romantic relationships she has had. She is also banned from contacting her ex-husbands and other men affected by her actions. Dina must also wear a tracking bracelet to monitor her movements, abide by a curfew, and provide details of her banking transactions if requested by the police. Richard Thompson, 63, who still lives in East Sussex, runs a property maintenance business. After learning of Dina's release, he expressed concern for his safety. Fully aware of what his ex-wife could do, he feared that his peaceful life was over. In July 2022, British newspapers published photos of Dina leaving a discount store carrying a large bag. Dina is now free to walk the streets of England. It is uncertain whether she has lured more victims or whether she has truly changed and chosen to live a better life. Hello everyone, today we will learn about another case. The case of Lauren Johansson. That evening, it was quite quiet. A light wind rustled the treetops near the cemetery by the Wolf River. A car sat on the side of an abandoned road, motionless and untouched for hours. But something was wrong. When the police arrived, a man jumped out and ran into the woods. The officers rushed after him, but the thick undergrowth, the dark night, and the uneven ground prevented them from catching the fugitive. Meanwhile, Robert Lance Johansson, Lauren's father, broke past the police, his heart pounding. His daughter had been missing for days, and now her car was right in front of him. He ran up to the door and took a deep breath. What he saw inside changed everything. Lauren Johansson was born on October 30th, 2001, in Ocean Springs, a quiet and picturesque town. The town attracted tourists with its green alleys, cozy beaches, and beautiful landscapes. But for Lauren, it was not just a place on the map, it was her home. Here, she grew up, surrounded by the love of her family. It was where she learned to be strong. Lauren grew up in a family where caring for others was part of life. Her parents, Lance and Tamla Robinson Johansson, surrounded their daughter with warmth. However, their life was not easy. Both of her older sisters had serious health problems, and from childhood, Lauren helped her parents take care of them. It was then that she learned patience and compassion, qualities that became part of her character. She was always ready to come to the rescue. She never complained and always put others before her own needs. From childhood, Lauren adored animals and was fascinated by wild birds. Her parents supported her hobby, and when Lauren became a teenager, she began to actively help in animal shelters. She looked after homeless cats and cared for horses after injuries. She treated wild animals and made it her life's goal to open her own shelter for rescued animals, to help those who could not help themselves. For this, she saved every cent, working since school. Lauren always wanted to help not only animals but also people. That's why she decided to become a nurse. She attended the University of Southern Mississippi and was successful in her studies despite working part-time jobs. Not only that, she also wanted to combine her studies with volunteer work. She worked day and night because she wanted to change the world for the better. In her senior year of high school, Lauren met Bryson Rivers. He was an athlete admired by everyone, raised in a religious and conservative family. As the eldest son, he carried a great responsibility since childhood, learning about discipline, respect for elders, and leadership qualities. He achieved success in sports, especially in football and athletics. Loved by teachers and admired by classmates, it seemed that he and Lauren were the ideal couple, supporting each other's dreams, they appearing happier than anyone else. However, this outer ideal hid a terrible truth, one that led to that night when they found her car on an abandoned road. At the beginning of their relationship, Bryson seemed caring and attentive. He showed interest in her life, listened to her daily experiences, and supported her dreams. Lauren appreciated his care. Bryson was proud of her kindness and determination. But over time, his care turned into obsessive control. At first, he just wanted to spend more time with her. Then he began to get jealous, asking more and more questions and urging her to communicate less with others. Soon, this behavior became a requirement. Lauren's friends noticed that she had changed. She began to avoid parties and meetings, stopped discussing Bryson. If someone asked about him, she justified his behavior, even when it became more manipulative. Lauren convinced herself that it was all because of love. Bryson had agitated outbursts of aggression mixed with displays of affection. If she tried to set boundaries, he would create a scene, only to apologize later and convince her it was for the sake of their future. He pressed on her feelings of guilt, saying she was the one provoking his jealousy. She didn't understand that she was in a toxic cycle. He would shout, then apologize, promising that everything would change, only for history to repeat itself. Later, when she told her friends, she tried to justify him, but they saw that she had changed. She became quieter, talked less about her feelings, and justified his actions more and more. He abruptly cut her off during public conversations, and when someone paid attention to her, he would react negatively. One time, when Lauren simply thanked a waiter for good service, Bryson's face changed immediately, and he spent the rest of the evening making sarcastic comments. She felt guilty even though she had done nothing wrong. Lance, her father, felt that something was wrong. He was worried and tried to talk to his daughter, but she brushed him off. Over time, she became more and more withdrawn. She didn't realize that she was no longer in control of her life. By December 2023, Lauren and Bryson were planning a trip, which she thought would be a romantic getaway, but he saw it as an opportunity to tighten his grip. Bryson was on leave from the army, and Lauren was on winter break from college. She wanted a change of scenery, while he wanted to isolate her. At first, everything seemed perfect. They walked around the city, visited the sights, and ate dinner at nice restaurants. Bryson seemed calm, but underneath the surface of this happiness, there was tension. Lauren felt this but ignored it. She believed that everything would be fine. On December 11th, Lauren and Bryson went to a bar to watch a football match. For Bryson, it was an important evening, and he was not going to miss it. At first, things were going quietly, but as soon as Lauren went to the restroom, the situation suddenly changed. She asked the waiter where the restroom was and left. A minute later, the same waiter accidentally walked down the same corridor, not even suspecting the effect this would have on Bryson. When Lauren returned to the table, she immediately felt that something was wrong. Bryson was tense, his gaze was harsh, and his voice was sharp. The more Lauren tried to calm him down, the worse it became. His accusations grew more absurd, her voice got louder, and his anger intensified. The people in the bar noticed the tension, but no one intervened. They left before anything serious could happen, but the real nightmare was just beginning. As soon as they got into the car, Bryson immediately locked the doors. He turned off the sound on her phone, snatched it, and put it in his pocket. Lauren was trapped. Bryson screamed and raged at her without explaining where he was taking her, but he continued to hit and intimidate her. His threats became more and more terrifying. Lauren was shaking with fear when the car stopped at a deserted park. She understood he wasn't going to let her go just like that. Lauren carried a gun in her bag just in case she tried to get it, but Bryson was faster. He snatched the bag from her hands. Now, she had no chance to save herself. For the next hour, he continued to hit her, speaking with frightening coldness. He smirked and said, "Her face now looks like a bowling ball." This phrase was accidentally recorded on her phone. At some point, Bryson made a mistake. He called his mother and screamed into the phone for help. Hearing Lauren's screams, his mother immediately called the police. Meanwhile, Lauren's father saw her location on the family GPS tracking. The police were already on their way. The officers heard her screams coming from the locked car, broke down the door, and saw Lauren beaten, shaking, with a swollen face, marks all over her body. Bryson was arrested shortly afterwards. Lauren was taken to the hospital. Her injuries were serious, and doctors were shocked by the level of violence she had suffered. Despite everything she had been through, Lauren didn't want to ruin his life. She refused to press charges. Even from jail, Bryson found ways to contact her. Every time, he said the same thing: "Forgive me, I will change, I need you," and part of her wanted to believe him. She changed her testimony to mitigate his guilt, but it was a mistake that changed the course of the whole case. Bryson remained in custody awaiting trial. The evidence against him was overwhelming: audio recordings from Lauren's phone, her initial testimony, and doctors' reports of her injuries. The court set bail at $250,000, which kept him behind bars temporarily. After 6 months, lawyers asked for the amount to be reduced. The judge agreed and reduced the bail to $150,000. Lauren's family was in shock. They knew that if he got out, Lauren would be in danger. But Bryson's mother quickly raised the money, and he was released while awaiting trial. After his release, Bryson was required to wear a GPS bracelet. He was forbidden to approach Lauren, write, or call her. Soon, a more serious situation arose. A few days after his release, Bryson's bracelet battery began to run low. He received several warnings about the need to charge it, but he ignored them. Eventually, the device completely discharged and became useless. The system immediately recorded a failure, and the authorities were alerted. However, they did not take urgent measures. Instead of responding immediately, they wasted hours and then a whole day without taking any action. No one reported it. He was again at large without supervision. Lance, Lauren's father, found out about it only through a voicemail from the police, in which they calmly informed him that Bryson had disappeared. They didn't even tell him exactly when it had happened. Robert was furious. He immediately called the police demanding action, but the police still dragged their feet. Hours passed, then days, and Bryson was on the run. Then Lauren disappeared. On July 2, 2024, Lance tried to call her, but the phone was silent. Soon, he received a strange message from her number. The text seemed alien, as if it hadn't been written by her. Lance felt a cold fear. He immediately called his other daughter, Caitlin, who lived with Lauren, and asked her to check if everything was okay. What she saw made her immediately call her father. The door to their apartment was wide open, all the security cameras were turned off, and Lauren's car was gone. Lance immediately reported his daughter missing, but the police hesitated again. A day passed before they finally agreed to track her car. On July 3, 2024, the police finally tracked Lauren's GPS. Her car was found in a remote area near the cemetery by the Wolf River. It was an isolated area surrounded by thick forest, far from busy roads. Lance rushed there as soon as he found out. When the officers approached the car, a man suddenly jumped out and rushed into the forest. It was Bryson Rivers. The police chased after him, but he disappeared among the trees. Lance, frantic with fear, rushed to the car. He opened the door, saw Lauren was lying in the back seat, her body wrapped in black plastic bags, her face and head covered. As a doctor, he had seen many terrible injuries, but nothing could prepare him for this. The police began to record evidence, but one thing was clear: this was not just a murder, it was a brutal, monstrous massacre. When forensic experts began to examine the car, they were confronted with a terrible sight. Blood stains on the upholstery indicated that Lauren had been subjected to a brutal and prolonged attack until her death. Lance was unable to leave the crime scene even when his health began to deteriorate from the stress he had experienced. He refused to leave until the investigators had finished their work. The search for Bryson continued for several hours, with helicopters equipped with thermal imaging scanning the forest for the slightest trace. Finally, a thermal signal was recorded, and the police surrounded him from all sides. After 9 hours of searching, Bryson was detained. He did not resist, his face remained calm, as if he did not realize what he had done. During interrogation, Bryson tried to give his version of events. He admitted that he came to Lauren's house that day knowing that she would be alone. He was angry that she no longer answered his calls. He waited for her to come out and then approached her. According to him, he just wanted to talk, but when Lauren refused and tried to leave, he grabbed her, dragged her into the car. She struggled, but he locked the doors and drove away. He took her to a deserted place outside the city, convinced that they needed to talk alone, but the conversation quickly turned into an argument. Lauren demanded that he let her go and threatened to call the police, which made him even angrier. He started yelling, blaming her for all their problems and for their breakup. When she tried to open the door and run out, he pushed her back into the car. He claims he was just trying to calm her down, but he hit her until she stopped moving. When he realized Lauren wasn't breathing, he tried to bring her to her senses, but it was too late. Realizing she was dead, he made a conscious decision. He took a blanket from the trunk, wrapped her body, and put it in the back seat. He then drove her to the cemetery by the Wolf River, where he left the car, planning to return later to get rid of the evidence. However, the police found the car before he could carry out his plan. Lauren's death and Bryson's arrest caused a wave of media outrage. This case was not only about the crime itself, people were shocked by how much the justice system had failed. How did it happen that a man with obvious signs of danger was released? Why did no one stop him earlier? How could the court ignore the evidence? And most importantly, could this murder have been prevented? Lauren's relatives, despite their grief, did not remain silent. They made a statement demanding reforms in the system so that such things would not happen again. They repeatedly demanded accountability for the mistakes that led to their daughter's murder. However, Bryson was not the only one condemned by society. Bryson's mother, who posted bail for him, faced particularly harsh criticism from the public. Despite the outrage, Lauren's family did not blame her directly. For them, it was more important to address the flaws in the system rather than punish a specific individual. Hundreds of people attended Lauren's funeral, friends, relatives, and residents of her hometown. She was not just a victim, she was a person who dreamed of helping others so that her goodness would not go to waste. In her memory, her family created a foundation that would help save animals, as Lauren had dreamed of doing in life. The trial of Bryson began in December 2024. He was charged with kidnapping, first-degree murder, and destruction of evidence. On Thursday, Rivers was taken by police to the county courthouse in downtown Hattiesburg, where he appeared before Judge Bob Helfrich for arraignment. So far, Bryson Rivers has pleaded not guilty to the murder of Lauren Johansson. The trial date has been set for June 25, 2025. As the trial continues, one question remains unanswered: will he receive the punishment he truly deserves, or will there be another loophole that allows him to evade full responsibility? For Lauren's family, this fight has long transcended a single case. They now aim to ensure that no one else has to endure what they experienced. Hello everyone, today we will learn about another case. The case of Fidel Lopez. This is the content of a chaotic call in the middle of the night. What's wrong with you? Hello, listen, you gotta help me. My girlfriend is in the bathroom, she can't get enough air. I mean, oh my God, she's gonna die. Come on, I can barely understand you. Calm down. Oh my God, I know what happened. There's blood on the floor, I don't know, she's not breathing. I mean, she's gonna die. Come on, what's the address? I don't know, I was just smoking my cigarette. Man, I'm just smoking my cigarette, and then this happened. Damn it, Maria. Come on, please, I need you to tell me an address so we can assist you. Sir, I need an address so we can help you. In the early hours of Sunday morning, Fidel Lopez, 24, lit a cigarette inside his new apartment. Just behind the broken sliding glass door lay his 31-year-old girlfriend, Maria Lizette Namath, in a pool of her own blood, either dead or dying. He finished his cigarette and gathered the courage to call 911. The operator, understanding the situation and the address, quickly dispatched officers. The call was recorded at 3:39 a.m. on Sunday, September 20th, 2015. The specialists witnessed a horror show. According to detective investigator Christopher Piper, when the officers entered Lopez's apartment, they found Lopez standing next to Maria's body. He called for help, and the doctors immediately rushed to Maria lying in the pool of blood. The police noted that the dressing room was also splattered with blood. They observed extensive damage to the walls and doors throughout the apartment. Maria showed no signs of life and was pronounced dead at 4:02 a.m. Clear signs of a struggle and a near certainty that violent acts had taken place led to the apartment being declared a crime scene, which was placed under guard. Lopez was also detained pending the arrival of investigators. Piper reported that when he arrived at the crime scene, he briefly spoke with one of the officers and conducted a preliminary search of the nearly empty apartment. A Sunrise police officer informed the detective about Maria and Fidel. They had moved into the apartment less than a week ago. Maria, a native of Peru, was a rental manager for an apartment complex, while Fidel worked as a mechanic at a truck stop. They had begun dating about a year and 2 months prior after meeting at a club. Maria had recently separated from her husband after 8 years of marriage, and Fidel lived with his mother. They decided to live together and moved into an apartment in Terrace, Sunrise. It was clear from the apartment that Maria and Fidel had just moved in, were starting their life together almost from scratch. There was no full set of furniture, boxes were used as tables. On the night of the incident, the apartment was bare, making the dents and holes in the walls immediately noticeable. A broken glass door, blood virtually everywhere. In Detective Piper's report, it states that Maria's naked body was lying on the bathroom floor. In addition to the blood on the floor, there were bloody marks on the walls in the hallway, on the closet and bathroom doors, as well as many other surfaces. Inside the closet were pieces that looked like bloody human flesh. Initially, it was assumed that Maria had tried to terminate a pregnancy, but as forensic experts later discovered, it was the intestines that Fidel had torn out of his girlfriend during rough intimate. Detective Piper introduced Lopez to the police officers, who took him to the Sunrise police station at 7:40 a.m., where he was informed of his Miranda rights and placed in an interrogation room. Fidel then signed a waiver of these rights, claiming that although he didn't understand English, if it were read aloud to him, he would comprehend it. Defense attorneys later would unsuccessfully argue that since Fidel was not a native English speaker, he could not fully understand the Miranda rules. Miranda rights are a legal requirement in the United States, mandating that detainees be informed of their rights. The law enforcement officer who detains them must receive a positive response to the question of whether the detainee understands what has been said. Fidel Lopez, a native of Havana, Cuba, moved to the United States at the age of 16, attended high school, but dropped out in the 10th grade. Fidel recounted to the investigator his relationship with Maria, how it began, and how it developed up to that Saturday. On that day, he left work a couple of hours early and met Maria, who had also left home early. Maria cooked dinner for them, consisting of chicken, beans, and rice. After dinner, they visited Fidel's mother in Miami, then returned to their apartment, where they each had a glass of margarita, splitting a third drink. Later, they went to a liquor store and purchased a bottle of tequila. By about 10 p.m., they were home. According to Fidel, Maria was already tipsy from the margarita. At home, they continued to drink, placing 2 cardboard boxes on the floor since they didn't have a table, put their glasses and snacks on the boxes while listening to music. As the tequila took effect, Maria asked Fidel to fulfill some of her intimate fantasies. Much of what Fidel claimed was cruel and dangerous, but since he was her partner, he tried to comply with her requests. However, his memories from that night were fuzzy. He was drunk. As they engaged in various activities, Maria mentioned that she was feeling sick and asked him to leave the bathroom. Fidel stepped outside and found himself outside, smoking a cigarette. He doesn't remember if he broke down the bathroom door or if it was already broken, but it is most likely that he did it since Maria wasn't strong enough. He only remembers seeing broken glass on the floor and does not recall more details about how he broke it and why. He also remembers that he went to the bathroom and that Maria was somehow breathing intermittently at that time. Fidel thought that perhaps she was hurting herself, but he did not hear the characteristic sounds associated with that. When the detectives asked about the quarrel that occurred that night, Fidel replied that there were no quarrels, they were just drinking and listening to music. The detectives continued to probe and posed leading questions. Lopez was asked if he felt offended when his girlfriend spoke dismissively about his masculine qualities. He replied that he was not upset, just felt a little stupid. The next question from the investigators was whether there had been any damage to the apartment before they moved in. Fidel responded that everything was fine in the apartment. However, since the detectives were focused on the specifics of when and why things happened, they asked what he might have done in those moments when he was angry. During further interrogation, it appeared that Fidel might have felt angry about Maria's ex-husband, whom she had mentioned during their intimate, but he couldn't recall exactly what was said. The detectives continued the interrogation in the form of a normal conversation, maintaining a neutral tone without accusations. When discussing the moment Fidel realized that Maria had died, it was evident that he was overcome with emotion. He then began to explain that he tried to perform artificial respiration on Maria, despite not knowing how to do it properly. She was lying with her eyes open but was not moving, and he lay next to her on the floor, trying to bring her back to life while screaming for help, hoping someone would come. I tried to give her artificial respiration, but I didn't even know how to do it. She wasn't breathing at all, she had her eyes open but wasn't moving. I carried her in my arms and waited for the police. The police were interested to know whether Fidel had ever physically assaulted Maria before or used force against her, but he denied any physical violence during the interrogation. Then he was asked an important question: does that mean you admit that everything that happened in this apartment was destroyed and broken by you? He confirmed this statement, insisting that he did not hurt Maria and continually asked if she was comfortable. Even when he noticed that she was bleeding, she said that she was not in pain. The officers informed Fidel that Maria had been examined by a forensic expert, who indicated that her injuries were very serious, involving internal bleeding, damage to internal organs, and multiple ruptures. When the police suggested that a brutal abuse had occurred, Fidel began to deny everything. He insisted he had done everything Maria asked him to do. They explained to him that Maria had serious internal injuries and that the pain she was experiencing would have been unbearable. Fidel, however, maintained that he had acted with her consent. The detectives attempted to persuade him that someone who truly loves another person could never cause such harm. They stated Maria was seriously injured. They began to reproach him for failing to show her due attention. There's blood everywhere. Fidel appeared confused and was then told he needed to confess to what happened, particularly since the police had learned much more than what he had disclosed. They argued that if he loved Maria, she deserved an honest conclusion to this story. Fidel again agreed with these conclusions. Fidel loved this girl, of course. He wouldn't have done anything to hurt her, but he did. After a moment of silence, Fidel began to speak rapidly and interrupted himself. He revealed that Maria had mentioned wanting to go to Peru to visit her mother and would be gone for a while, which meant Fidel could not use her car to travel to and from work. This prompted an argument, though he could not recall how they ended up in the closet. They made up, had intimate, and at one point Maria called out the name of her ex-husband. This happened twice. Then Fidel described a series of attacks on Maria using both his body and various objects around the house, shoving them into her crotch. After his rage, Lopez returned to the closet where his girlfriend lay unconscious and continued to insert various foreign objects into her vagina and anus, including a beer bottle, a hair straightener, both fists, and his arm up to his elbow. Fidel also admitted to pulling internal tissue out of Nemeth's body while she was unconscious. He then took her naked body into the bathroom and attempted to revive her by splashing water in her face, but she did not wake up. He then washed the blood off his hands and went to the porch outside their apartment to smoke a cigarette. When Lopez returned inside to try to clean up the crime scene and conceal Namath's dislodged intestines, he realized she was no longer breathing. He began running around the rooms, smashing and breaking everything in sight. Afterward, he stopped to exhale, have a smoke, took off the clothes he was wearing, washed himself, put on fresh clothing without getting dirty, and called 911. Fidel confessed to the detectives that he committed the crime because, during their intimacy, at the height of pleasure, Maria shouted out another name. He expressed regret for what he did, saying he didn't want to kill her, but he knew he killed her. He took her life. He won't even be able to see her again. While the interrogation was ongoing, experts were collecting evidence at the crime scene and examining Maria's mutilated body. Police officers interviewed neighbors, many of whom noted hearing screams and sounds of conflict. Fidel Lopez was arrested and charged with murdering his girlfriend, Maria Namath. A long, dreadful night dragged on until midday before Fidel was shackled and transferred to the Aburrá County Jail, a man with no criminal record other than a 2014 arrest for intoxicated hooliganism. He was jailed in a cell recognized as a murderer, a monster who deserved to be caged. Perhaps it was the alcohol that drove him to madness. Perhaps jealousy turned him into someone he never imagined he could become. In the early stages of the trial, Fidel's lawyers attempted to challenge his entire interrogation and confession, arguing that his limited knowledge of English meant he could not understand his Miranda rights or request the presence of a lawyer from the moment of his arrest, as well as his right not to answer certain questions at his discretion. However, the judge ruled that there was sufficient evidence on the video recording showing that Fidel not only had a functional command of English but also fully understood what he was being asked. On July 14, 2017, after a lengthy stay in the Broward County Jail, Fidel agreed to a plea deal. On August 3, 2017, Fidel Lopez accepted charges of first-degree murder, abuse, assault, and was sentenced to life in prison. The terms of the plea deal prohibit him from appealing the sentence and ensure that he will never be eligible for parole. The peace of the families of Fidel Lopez and Maria Namath was shattered that fateful night. No one can undo the monstrous events that occurred.